We'll see those winds really starting to pick up, and for western parts of Scotland we could see gusts up to 70 or 80 miles an hour, and in association with some high spring tides that could lead to some coastal impacts. Temperatures still a little above average for the time of year, but definitely feeling cooler than Saturday with those strong winds. The next area of rain then arrives as we go through Sunday evening, particularly for Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, seeing the heavy outbreaks of rain through Sunday night and into the start of Monday. It will then remain unsettled as we go through the first part of next week, but temperatures still a little above average for the time of year.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be next.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. Winning the money enabled me to treat my children, which I've not been able to do for a while. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. Good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on Saturday. Oh my God, I know. Where is the month going? No idea. This is the weekend on GB News. Labour's war on families. It never ends, does it? Inheritance tax, school tax, stamp duty, national insurance and even more tax. The family car are all on the table as we edge closer to the Halloween budget from hell. Does the Treasury have the family in its crosshairs? And was One Direction star Liam Payne badly let down by the music industry? Sharon Osbourne, Simon Cowell have spoken out, and I'll be joined by author and music historian, the wonderful Leslie Ann Jones, with a great exclusive. And the King Down Under, King Charles and Queen Camilla, continue their 6-day tour of Australia as they are greeted by the country's Prime Minister and a torrential rainstorm. Meanwhile, Prince Harry is showing off his impressive surfing skills. As you can see, they're marvellous. Look at that, having fun, doesn't he? Talking of having fun, this is a shocker. The number of pubs in Britain could plummet to fewer than 1,000, not this week though, by 2074. If this current trend continues, a rapid decline could see pubs become an endangered species within 5 decades. That's not long, folks. How can we save the British boozer? And former Tory MP Miriam Case is in Croatia for us for the second European Congress on Family, discussing birth rates and why we're having less babies. I'm Dawn Neeson. Don't get started on having more babies now, right? OK, watch the programme first. I'm Dawn Neeson and the weekend starts right here and now. I always say this, and I genuinely mean it, the favourite part of the show every week is talking to yous lot. And it is, believe me, nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Anything you want to talk about. Look, it's the weekend, literally the weekend. Let's have a chat. What do you want to talk about? Let me know. It's really easy to join in with the programme, and all you do is visit gbnews.com/yoursay. Join the conversation. I'll read as many of your views out as I can. But first, let's get the news headlines with the very wonderful Will Hollis.
Dawn, a very good afternoon. The time is just gone 12 o'clock. Let's get you your top stories at midday. The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could raise £7 billion in revenue if the freeze is extended until 2028. It could help plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances, with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the Labour promise not to raise taxes. The King and Queen have spent their first night in Australia ahead of their royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker is in Sydney for us.
It's a rest day for the King and Queen's Day following their very long journey from the United Kingdom, partly a decision taken because of the King's cancer diagnosis, making sure he's got enough energy to carry out his engagements later on this week. The King and Queen has an informal cup of tea with the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese last night. Tomorrow they'll be attending a church service in northern Sydney where they are expected to meet members of the public.
However, the visit prompts questions over the country's future as a constitutional monarchy, with calls for it to become a republic. Earlier, Cameron spoke to Alexander Volz from the Australian Monarchist League, who says support for the King and Queen is strong.
I think the tour is going to go really well. We're very optimistic, and at the end of the day, it's a reminder of the significance of our system and just how wonderful it is for this country. We love a bit of patriotism in the Monarchist League. We're very proud of our country. We love being Australian. We love our King and Queen of Australia. And so, yes, we'll be distributing a lot of flags. I think we've got about 15,000 ready to go.
To Argentina. The father of pop star Liam Payne has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the Casa Sur Hotel, where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects. His family have said they are heartbroken. A drone strike on the holiday home of Israel's Prime Minister failed, sources say. Fired from neighbouring Lebanon, 3 drones were aimed at the town Say-Sur-Ir, with 1 hitting a building and 2 intercepted. An Israeli spokesperson says Prime Minister Netanyahu was not in the vicinity at the time of the attack, and there have been no reports of casualties. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader says the death of Yahya Sinwar will not halt its axis of resistance. A car being driven by a heavily pregnant woman flipped 3 times when it crashed with an unmarked police car in south-east London, according to an eyewitness. The witness told reporters he saw the police car driving on the wrong side of the road before it collided with her on Thursday night in Eltham. Both the woman and her baby died from their injuries. 2 officers have since been discharged from hospital. An investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has been launched. And finally, take a look at this. Could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to, get this, 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and reclining features. After backlash against some existing services where passengers compared seats to ironing boards, rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing seats. Well, I'll fall asleep just about anywhere, so I'm happy with those. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much. We'll try not to fall asleep now, mate. We've got a show to do. OK, let's get stuck into today's show. We've got a packed show for you with some great guests and some really good exclusives, so you don't want to be going anywhere, OK? Now, we're starting off front page of all the newspapers, what we're all talking about. Millions of taxpayers could find themselves paying a higher rate of tax after the budget. That's as the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, there she is, prepares to extend the freeze on income tax thresholds, which Labour previously criticised as being a stealth tax. To help balance the books, Rachel also intends to increase stamp duty while proposing approximately $3 billion in welfare cuts over the next 4 years. That's not to mention other policies such as the proposed VAT on private school fees, which we did know about. They were honest about that bit, which Labour also intend to implement. And this raises the question, is Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party effectively just declaring war on families? Hell, on all of us, and particularly if you're older, you know, pensioners. OK, joining me now is Paul Richards, a former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time on a Saturday afternoon. Paul, the front pages of all the papers today, the budget from hell. I mean, why they're doing it at Halloween, I don't know. It's an absolutely shoo-in for headline writers, isn't it? Were they telling the truth? Were Labour telling the truth or being completely honest in their manifesto? We're not going to touch taxes for the working people.
Hi, Dawn. Well, I think the headline's obviously a pure speculation. I mean, none of us know what's going to be in the budget on 30th of October. What we do know, though, is that when ministers came in, they discovered that the previous government had been lying and dissembling and covering up the truth. And there's a huge black hole in the public finances that have to be filled somehow. And it's only getting worse. It seems now a 40 billion black hole that has to be plugged somehow. And you say, is there a war on families? Well, you know, families rely on the National Health Service. So I want to see more money for the health service to get waiting lists down. I was delighted this week with all the announcements around investment in jobs and apprenticeships, because families need wage earners and they need young people going out to work. I like the pledges on more police, because I think families want to feel their kids are safe out on the street after dark, and pensioners too. So I just feel that there are things that are going to happen in the budget that are very much in favour of families, but against a really difficult backdrop where the Tories had promised money where there wasn't any money, and we're now having to sort of clear up the mess.
The problem I and many of our viewers have with this, Paul, is that both the Office for Budget Responsibility and the Institute for Fiscal Studies warned that neither the Conservatives nor the Labour's spending plans would cover the black hole that Rachel Reeves didn't know about, but almost everybody did. We were warned about it. And it's like, you know, we were told there would not be a tax on working people. And everything I'm hearing so far is a tax on working people. You know, we've discussed the national insurance rise. They weren't going to touch national insurance, but they are touching national insurance. But for employers, many small businesses are now saying, we can't cope with this. You know, are people that run small businesses not working people?
Well, again, it's pure speculation, so let's not get too carried away till we actually see the Red Book and see what she announces on the 30th. But the pledge, I mean, she's under an enormous amount of pressure, by the way, to increase VAT, to put up national insurance for workers, to increase income tax. And she is holding the line on all of that, as far as we can tell. Labour went into this election saying that they wouldn't increase those taxes, and it looks likely, at least, that they're not going to. So the pressures on the other side to increase taxes are being withheld, but the money has to come from somewhere. And if it is an increase on employer national insurance, of course, that is within the scope of what they said Labour would do in government. So it's not a breach of the pledge. And it has to be, the money has to come from somewhere. Now, the big plan, as you all know, Dawn, is growth. So the way you get through all of this is to grow the economy, so there's more people earning more money, to get more people off benefits and into work, to get foreign investment coming in. But that takes time. It's only sort of 3 or 4 months since the election, and in the immediate term, there is a great big mess that needs to be swept up. And I suspect this budget will be about that, and then about laying those foundations so we can see a growing economy that we all benefit from.
OK. Look, I mean, we won't keep on about the national insurance because I don't understand how you're going to get growth if you're going to make it more expensive for businesses to operate. But, I mean, that's another issue. We don't want to go down that road all the time. But, I mean, sort of like, national insurance, VAT, income tax, not touching, that's 60% of tax revenue comes from those three taxes. Do you think, as a former Labour special advisor, do you think Labour painted themselves into a corner by making those pledges? If they'd have said, honestly, look, we are in this situation, whether you believe the black hole or not, we are in this situation, we have to raise money, so we are going to have to look at these taxes.
Well, I'm a veteran of many Labour campaigns, and I can remember the 1992 campaign when we went into an election with a sort of a pretend budget that looked like it might put taxes up. And the Tories came out with their tax bombshell and told everyone they'd be paying more money. And Labour lost an election that many people thought they would win on this issue. So I absolutely understand why you can't, after 14 years in opposition, go into an election campaign, and just say, oh, we're going to put your taxes up, because Labour may not have won that election. And if you look at how many seats have got very small majorities for Labour MPs, it's a very shallow majority overall. It's not a sort of huge, landslide. It's quite delicate. And I think many of their seats would not have gone Labour if people felt that Labour was punitive and vindictive when it comes to taxes. So that's why you can understand the economics have to take a second place to the politics in that sort of situation.
It's almost, Paul, like you're saying, sort of like not lie, OK, be economical with the truth in your manifesto, otherwise you might not win.
No, I'm saying that you have to be super clear. We said no increase in VAT, and that's not going to happen in the election, in the budget rather. Same with the NI and same with the income tax. But taxes have to go up in other places. I'm delighted to see the tax going on to the businesses that provide education to 7% of our population, also known as the public schools. I mean, they are businesses and they should be taxed like businesses.
We can get another debate out of that one, certainly with us.
We can, and I'm sure we will.
We will. Special needs children. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. That's Paul Richards, a former Labour special advisor. And Collins, what do you think of what you've heard Paul say? Do you think you've been lied to by the Labour Party in their manifesto, or economical with the truth? gbnews.com/your say and have your say, because this is going to affect every single one of us. Working people, because let's be honest, we are all working people, aren't we? OK, now let's see what my guest this afternoon, the wonderful JJ Anisiobi, makes of what you've just heard. JJ, you are, in theory, a Labour supporter. You're more on the left than the right. Do you feel a little bit let down about what you were promised in the manifesto and what we don't know what's in the budget for sure? It is all speculation at the moment. But we have been warned it's going to be scary.
So every government that comes into power, whatever they promise in the manifesto, they will never achieve every single promise. That never happens. This, unfortunately, as much as we don't like it, this is what I would call responsible governance. Rather than just ploughing ahead and doing everything that they've promised to do, they're having to adapt to whatever the reality and the current situation is. So I can understand why they may have to raise taxes. However, having said that, as a Labour man, I'm bitterly disappointed with Starmer, who repeatedly said, before he got elected, we will not raise taxes on working people. It's always the people who are working the hardest, the people who are being paid the least, the people who are doing the most hours, are the ones who end up getting sucker punched. And that's exactly what Labour if the budget happens in the way that we're told it's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. Working people are the ones who are going to suffer the most. And that is all I see when I see the current Labour government is a diet version of the Tories. I don't see. But George Galloway, they're the same sides of two cheeks of the same buttocks, bottom derriere, and he was exactly right. I don't see a difference between the two of them. And actually, I would actually rather, even being a Labour supporter, I'd rather have a Tory government that I know is a Tory government because I know exactly what I'm going to get from a Tory government. I didn't vote for Labour expecting to have a diet regime of Tories, and that's what we've gotten. Rachel Reeves is in a difficult position. She's trying to do what's responsible. We're going to feel the pinch now. Maybe that means in 5 years' time the country's better off. But instead of saying we've got a £22 billion black hole and we're going to charge more for employers, well, why don't you scrap this net zero plan that costs £22 billion? Scrap that. Why don't we say, under the Tory government, I think we pledged something like £15 billion to the Ukraine, and now you've got Keir Starmer saying, where we, as Labour, are going to give the Ukraine £3 billion a year. Well, why don't you stop that? Don't give them £3 billion a year. Where's that money going in the Ukraine? Take back that £3 billion and pay for the heating for our pensioners instead. There's plenty of other ways for Labour to try and reduce this deficit and this black hole, but they're not doing it. So I see it from both sides, but as a Labour man, I'm basically disappointed. This is not a Labour party. This is not a Labour party.
You wouldn't describe this as a Labour party?
No, the Labour that I grew up with and the Labour that my parents supported and indoctrinated me in has moved so far away from me that I don't recognise this as Labour anymore. I recognise it as a makeshift Tory party, and that's not what I voted for. That's not what I wanted.
Interesting. JJ, thank you very much. JJ will be staying with me for a while, for sure. But let's have a look at what some of you are saying. As you said, it's very easy to join in with this conversation. gbnews.com/your say. So let's read out some of your views now. She's just putting her glasses on, so she looks more intelligent. Do I look more intelligent? No, don't answer that one, I know. OK, and this is from Miri with the highest rate of inheritance tax in Europe. That's another one that is under threat, isn't it? How can it be increased even more? Common sense. Not a lot of that around at the moment. Good afternoon, Common Sense says, how about we scrap MPs' tax-free pensions and MPs' bloated expenses? That comes up a lot, doesn't it? Because we are paying for their heating allowances whilst taking them away from pensioners, indeed. And as Susanna says, how can you tell a member of the government is lying? Their mouth is open. I think that applies to whatever colour rosette they're wearing as well, doesn't it, at the moment, Susanna? And let me see. And Karen, good afternoon. Karen says, Labour's attitude to the electorate is to treat us like mushrooms. They keep us in the dark and feed us. I'll leave the rest of that to your imagination. OK. And Wayne finally had the final say on this one, Wayne. For now, in any case, the only thing I believe from Starmer was his dad was a toolmaker. After all, he helped make that spanner. Boom, boom. The old ones are the best, but keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. Very easy to get involved in the conversation. And as I said, it's my favourite part of the show. I want to talk to you because this show is about you. OK, now we're moving on for now, but we'll be coming back to this one because a lot of you are angry, I can tell. Liam Payne's dad has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the Casa Sur Hotel where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects in the room. Liam's family have said they are heartbroken. And it's a shock story. Even if you're not a One Direction fan, you can barely name a tune. It is the death of a 31-year-old who's got a 7-year-old lad. Here is showbiz journalist Showbiz Supremo, I think she deserves. Stephanie Tecci now to bring us up to date on this tragic story. Steph, thank you very much for joining. Stephanie, we've seen pictures of Liam's dad going over there.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking. You don't, as a parent, you don't expect to be burying your child. No. And I think with this family now, their grief hasn't been in private. It's very much been in public. And because Liam's death took place in Argentina, Dawn, we both know that the rules have been different in the way the media have been publicising his death. And it seems like all the rules have been thrown out of the you know, book in that sense. And Cheryl Cole last night came out and said, you know what...
Cheryl is the mum of Liam's baby. Son.
She's come out and said, please remember, you know, aside from being a pop star and a celebrity, Liam was a father as well, and one day his son is going to have access to all of these reports, and she just feels so sad that she can't protect him from that.
Yeah, I must admit, as a journalist working in this country for many years, I've been slightly taken aback by how they have been... We've listened to the emergency report, we've seen pictures from the inside the hotel room, and a website in America also... Originally, they removed it straight away, published a picture of Liam's body covered up, thankfully. The one question, I mean, you know, he was only 31 years old. Yeah. He did everything so early. Had fame at 16, auditioned for X Factor at 14 originally, but fame at 16, fatherhood at 23, and now this senseless death. How much do you think, Steph, that the showbiz industry and certainly programmes like X Factor have to step up to the plate now and take responsibility for how a talent like Liam are treated?
Well, you see, when Liam was on X Factor, it was 2010. We're now 2024, so there's been a 14-year gap between his appearance and how reality TV shows are handled these days. You know, Sharon Osbourne last night in her tribute to Liam said, "We let you down. Where was the industry when you needed them?" And that is a big question now, which people are facing, whether is it worth going on these reality TV shows to be getting these 15 minutes worth of fame? ITV came out yesterday and said, look, we're at the top of our game when it comes to duty of care for talent who are appearing on our reality TV shows. But the big question is now, for someone like Liam, who had the fame so young, 31, do you still provide that care for someone like that who is now an adult and who has taken his life into his own hands? That's the bigger question. But I think now, going forward, a lot of parents are going to be thinking whether it is worth sending their children or young teenagers to appear on these reality TV shows. There are now so many watchdogs in the industry, Dawn, that are now saying, if you've got a problem, we are there to support you. But I guess for me personally, as a showbiz journalist, I just think the whole notion of the 15 minutes of fame needs to be thrown out. I think once, you know, you're no longer famous for what you're doing, you should still know that you can still have a successful career and have a healthy lifestyle as well.
OK, Steph, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Right, OK, I'm Dawn Newsom and this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up. It's a really packed show. The number of pubs in Britain, oh, come on, people, what are we doing? Are plummeting. Is it time to save our British heritage and go down the pub? Not now, by the way, not now, after the show. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, we're having beans this morning.
Beans for breakfast. There's no better breakfast, is there?
I like beans on toast for breakfast.
So do I. I would actually call myself a baked beans connoisseur.
Would you? Well, we can put you to the test. Tell us what the story is.
The story is, you might think beans, you might think Heinz. Heinz means beans.
Beans means Heinz.
Beans means Heinz. Heinz means beans. Who knows? So, of all of the supermarket baked beans, it is actually the Aldi supermarket version, this version over here, which came out on top. The Bramwell's baked beans, 76% on the taste test.
And they're much cheaper as well.
Much cheaper. Households can save, if you're buying 2 cans a week, £100 a year buying the Aldi version of these baked beans. So we thought we're going to do a blind taste test this morning.
Yes. So we've got the Aldi beans, we've got M&S beans, and we've got beans Heinz. So I think number 2 is the best one.
Yeah, I agree.
Right,
2 came first best to me.
So the Heinz is number 3.
Interesting.
Which was the worst one?
Which is the worst one, which is the ones... Actually, I'll buy it home.
Do you know what? That's just proven it. M&S was number 1. And Aldi was number 2, which was our favourite as well.
I said M&S.
Yeah, and we both said Aldi.
We did say Aldi. I have to be honest, I was not expecting that.
I told you. This is a hill I will die on. These are the beans that I get at home and I love them.
At university, you get the tin that's half that size, and it was 21p for the store ones and 23p for Heinz baked beans. And as I say, the key was in the thickness of the sauce and how hard the beans were. They
actually are really nice.
Stunning.
I am really surprised, and we buy more than 2 cans a week, so it saved me a couple of £100.
We get through 2 cans.
So you like the Aldi ones?
I like the Aldi ones. Okay. I'm shocked.
they're a lot
There you go.
cheaper. Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. This is The Weekend with me, Dawn Newsome. It is 12:26, but I don't know why I tell you the time, because it's a Saturday, so you really shouldn't be caring. It is indeed the weekend, literally on the weekend, so time isn't that important. But so many of you, I love it when you get in touch straight away. So many of you getting in touch about how you feel let down. Many of you Labour supporters, by the way, how you feel let down by what Labour have done in 100 days, and how many of you are dreading the budget. And we were warned to dread the budget, weren't we? I mean, you know, things can only get worse. I mean, with Tony Blair, things can only get better. Now it's things can only get worse. So let's read a few of your comments out. And this is from blah, blah, blah. This is from Colin. People in this country have got to realise government have no money. It's our tax money they're wasting on silly things we want stopped. JJ was alluding to that. Other things are... you know, they could be saving money on rather than taxing us. This is Barbara. Barbara, interesting. I think JJ is misguided about old Labour. My family is more working class than his. How do you know? But my parents embraced Thatcher as she gave hope. Things can only get better. Remember, we did hear that under Tony Blair as well. The Tories wanted them rewarded for their hard work, so cared more than Labour. Perhaps it's confusing working people with benefit claimants. Well, I don't think anyone's entirely sure what working people actually means. I mean, do Labour, when they refer to working people, mean the working class? Had this conversation with a Labour MP the other day, and he explained that working people were people with no savings, OK? Well, that alludes to a lot of people in this country at the moment. I mean, you know, people that in fairly good jobs that I know, present company included, just have no savings. So, I mean, it's like, what is working people? I don't know. What do you think? gbnews.com/yoursay. Right, now we're going to turn to another subject very close to my heart. A new analysis warns that the number of pubs in Britain could drop below 1,000 by 2074. Sounds a long way away, but think about it, it's actually not. That's if the current closure rates persist. The decline in pub numbers on UK high streets is accelerating due to rising costs and insolvency, with 769 pub businesses closing last year alone. I think it's roughly 2 a day at the moment. Let's see what my panel make of this. Now, the lovely Steph Techie has agreed to stay with me because she's so marvellous.
Couldn't get enough of you, Dawn.
And she's always in a pub. That's the main thing.
She's in a pub. Yeah, the truth be known, she's an expert on this today. And obviously, JJ has come back and joined us again. OK, so let's see. Do we have our expert on this one? Do we have our... No, we don't. We don't have our expert at the moment. He might join us in a minute. We're having a few technical issues with the line going down. So, OK, pubs are closing. Steph, as a noun expert on pubs. What do you make of this? I find this shocking. I mean, pubs, basically, in 50 years' time, will be gone the way of the dinosaurs. They won't exist.
I think what's wrong with this story is they're making it seem that people have lost interest in pubs, and I don't think that is the case. I think pubs are the bread and butter of the high street. I think what's the problem is pubs cannot stay open because it's not financially viable for them anymore. The cost of running a pub, the bills, the electricity, actually importing the alcohol, it's gone beyond their heads. So I think that's the reason why pubs are no longer the top of the town anymore. But when we look at somewhere like London as well, London is full of so much entertainment that is vying for consumers' attention. And I think maybe what pubs can do is they can keep up with the day and age and maybe potentially come with some more unique features to attract punters in.
Oh, OK, like?
Like, for instance, they could have, like, a live mic night or something like that, or have some talks, just something different that most young people are interested in, because what I'm finding with Gen Z is they're not really drinking alcohol as much anymore.
Yeah.
They're more on this health kick now. So if you want to invite such people into a pub, do something that will make them want to come through your doors.
Well, that's it. Stephanie's right. There's a supply and demand issue here. We can't... a year ago, people were talking about Christianity in this country dying out, not if people are going to church, people up in arms, that Islam's growing and Christianity is going down. Simple fix, go to church then. It's free. With pubs, if you want our pubs to stay open, you have to go to them. It's that simple. It's supply and demand. There's no reason that we should have 1,000 pubs in 1 square mile if the people aren't going to them. Unfortunately, it's cheaper to stay at home. But you're completely right, Stephanie. I agree with you on this. My local pub in Hackney, it's called Duke of Richmond. They are doing things...
Free pint for JJ.
Free pint for
Here's what they do. On a Monday, every day, happy hour, 4 till 7. Monday, £15 for burger, chips and a pint. Wednesday, half-price bottles of wine and champagne. Friday, half-price lunches. And the Sunday roast has been voted the second best in the country. You've got to be inventive. You've got to do stuff like this to make it... Because if I'm going to go to a pub and spend 15 quid, well, I can buy a bottle of wine from my local supermarket and do that at home.
Yeah.
Have my own TV on without having to queue at a bar.
Yeah.
You've got to make an incentive that makes it better for us to go outside and drink.
OK, but that's fine. But it is expensive running a pub now. I mean, we've got energy prices
that
have gone up recently. Well, I mean, I know they've come back down with the energy, but it's very expensive to run a pub.
And also, with this day of doom coming, i.e. the budget, we don't know how pubs are going to be affected. They might be even hit even more. But I think a bigger question is, are people socialising as much anymore since the pandemic? I think now people are so attached to their devices, they've got Netflix. People have everything they need at home these days, so venturing out has to be a really big thing because people are tightening their purse strings now. So you go into the pub, how much are you going to spend in a night? 30, 40, 50 pounds for one night?
Exactly.
You can get a bottle, watch something at home. So I think as well there is this pandemic of people not wanting to go out as much anymore. And this is why the pubs are being affected.
Do you think, JJ, that the government now should actually be concentrating on helping our hospitality industry? Everything we don't know for sure, but everything we have been hinted at in the budget is not going to help. National insurance on employers.
Yeah, it's like the people who own my local pubs in my area...
You've got your pint, all right?
But these are not... millionaires. There's this thought that people think, oh, these guys own a pub, they're minted. These are still just working class people trying to operate a business, and the more the government doesn't help them, the worse that is for everyone in the community. Because I'm not going to go to my local pub and spend money unless there's a reason for me to go out there and spend it where I feel like I'm making a saving and I'm having a good time. So the economy is not going to grow unless the government helps out.
Yeah, no, indeed. So there you go. Labour, if you're listening, help the pubs out. And it's not just about booze either. It's also about a socialising and loneliness. Lots of old people. I mean, I used to be a barmaid, best job I ever had, after this one, obviously. And lots of old people used to come into the pub, it was in East London, and just sit there with half a pint, but company, and it was warm, because they couldn't afford their heating bills. Hello, Labour.
Dawn, you know what? If Keir Starmer does something for the pubs and reduces the cost of alcohol, we can call him Keir Beer. Wonderful. Wonderful.
You can tell that JJ's a very good journalist. Anyways, thank you very much. I'm Dawn Neeson, Mrs. GBNews. There's loads more coming up on today's show, including all of your views. But first, let's go back for the headlines with Will Hollis.
Thank you, Dawn. At 12:30, your top story. The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could save £7 billion, raise £7 billion in revenue if the freeze is extended until 2028. It could help plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances, with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the Labour promise not to raise taxes. The King and Queen will have spent their first night in Australia ahead of their royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. But the visit raises questions over the role of the monarchy in the country's future. The Foreign Secretary says British businesses are seeking stability and clarity with China. David Lammy is on a 2-day visit to the country. The Foreign Minister's Chinese counterpart said that bilateral ties are at a new starting point and competition among major powers should not be the backdrop to the era. To Argentina now, the father of pop star Liam Payne has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting Casa Sur Hotel, where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a 3rd-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects in the room. His family have said they are heartbroken. Back to the UK now. A car being driven by a heavily pregnant woman flipped 3 times when it crashed with an unmarked police car in southeast London, according to an eyewitness. The witness told reporters he saw the police car driving on the wrong side of the road before it collided with her on Thursday. Both the woman and her baby died from their injuries. 2 officers have since been discharged from hospital. And an investigation into by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has been launched. And could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and reclining features. After backlash against some existing services where passengers compared seats to ironing boards, rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing seats. Those are your latest headlines. I'll have more for you in 30 minutes.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So today should be a dry day for most of us. There will be some sunny spells around, but Storm Ashley arriving from the west overnight tonight brings some wet and windy weather. Situated out in the Atlantic at the moment, we do have this ridge of high pressure ahead of Storm Ashley. A weather front out towards the southeast will bring some remnants of some cloud and rain for the southeastern parts of England this afternoon, perhaps turning heavy at times here. But for much of the rest of the UK, there will be plenty of sunny spells around, maybe 1 or 2 isolated showers, particularly southwest England, Wales, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too, but they should be few and far between. Temperatures today a little above average for the time of year, 16 or 17 degrees in the south and 13 or 14 degrees further north, so feeling quite pleasant in any of that sunshine. The rain in the far southeast eventually clears its way eastwards as we head in towards this evening, leaving a dry start to the night for most of us. There will still be 1 or 2 showers around, particularly across western parts of the UK, particularly northwestern parts of Scotland seeing 1 or 2 showers, but quite a mild end to the day with those temperatures well into the double figures. As we then go through the rest of the night, we see what those showers continuing across western parts of Scotland, but clouds starting to build from the southwest as we see this initial band of rain associated with Storm Ashley pushing its way eastwards into the early hours of the morning. As this initial band of rain arrives, we do see those winds starting to pick up, particularly through Irish sea coast. We could see gusts here of around 50 to 60 miles per hour. Generally quite a mild night though, under all that cloud and particularly those strong winds in the west. We could see the odd touch of frost across the very far east of Scotland, but generally a mild start to the day on Sunday. That band of rain pushes its way eastwards quite quickly due to those brisk westerly winds, but the winds really picking up across the northwest as we head through Sunday afternoon. We could see gusts here of 70 to 80 miles per hour, so there could be some disruption associated with those winds. Another mild day, temperatures still above average, but feeling cooler than Saturday.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect And then you throw me into the mix, and trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Packed show for you, absolutely packed. Now, former Tory MP Miriam Cates is in Croatia for the second European Congress on Family. And here she is now to talk to us live from Dubrovnik, which I'm sure the weather is much better there than it is here, to tell us what exactly is going on. Miriam. Hi, Miriam. Good to see you. Miriam, explain...
Well, hello. Good afternoon.
Explain exactly what is going on out there. What you're doing, basically.
Good afternoon. Well, yes, as you said, it is a beautiful city and it is sunny. Sorry to have to tell you that. But the European Congress of Families is a conference for politicians, organisations across Europe to come together to share ideas about how we tackle some of the challenges that families are facing. Now, we don't talk about this issue much in Britain, but in Europe, it's a big talking point. The collapsing birth rates, the difficulties children are facing with social media addiction, and also high housing prices, which is something we are familiar with in the UK, but is actually affecting families across Europe and across the world, actually, and is stopping young people from buying houses and therefore starting families. So this is a big talking point here in Europe, and we're speaking to people who've got some great ideas in their own countries about how to tackle the problem. But I have got another Brit with me here, Max Rangeley, who is from the Cobden Centre, which is an economic think tank in the UK. And we were talking about housing prices, Max, and the difference that that's made to family. But it's not just a British problem, is it?
That's right. House prices are really a critical factor in low fertility rates. But an underlying cause of this that's not often discussed is actually the policies of central banks in recent years. And so what we've seen actually effectively over the last generation or so is central banks responding to each recession by creating a series of larger and larger debt bubbles by setting interest rates lower and lower. And that's contributed to these very high house prices that we see really across the developed world now. So young people can't afford to buy houses.
So they set the interest rates really low, which means that people borrow more and more money, so house prices go up and up effectively.
That's exactly right. So if we think about America, for instance, when the bubbles of the late 1980s burst, Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve responded by setting interest rates at 3%, the lowest for decades. That then created an even larger bubble, which was the dot-com bubble. Then when that burst in 2000, he responded with even lower interest rates of 1%, which then created an even larger bubble, which was the housing bubble. Then, of course, when that burst in 2008, the response was even lower interest rates, the lowest interest rates in history. In fact, years and years of 0% interest rates, and that served to create an even larger debt bubble in 2008. And one of the major consequences of that is really across the developed world, young people can no longer afford to buy housing. But what's really different with this compared to previous recessions in previous decades and even centuries was that you've got this combination of really stagnant living standards for most people, or even falling living standards, combined with asset prices going higher and higher, including housing, of course. And so the effects on fertility rates are pretty obvious.
So actually some of the policies that countries are introducing around giving families more benefits might help a little bit, but actually the best thing that we could possibly do is to solve this problem of overinflated housing. I'm sure there's many of our viewers would completely agree with that. Unless we can solve the housing problem, people are just not going to settle down and have children. Anyway, back to you in the studio, Dawn. It's been a fascinating conference.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Miriam, for telling us about what's going on in Europe and what should be going on over here, maybe. I've got time for a very quick chat with my panel. Got the lovely Steph T, as you are now, Stephanie Techi and JJ Anisiobi. JJ, you've got your little boy with you outside, haven't you? It's one you made earlier.
He's not in the rain. He makes it sound like he's just out of the car park.
We've chained him out in the rain because we're like that here with children. What do you make about what you've just heard? We are not having enough babies in this country.
We're not, and partly because of financial practicalities. My kid, I could send him to a really average nursery where he's going to get not a great education, or send him to a half-decent one. That's going to cost me £2,000 a month for nursery. Now he's in school, the cost has come down. But actually, as a society, when we develop and we're living longer, careers are important. Well, I think in the 1970s, the average age for a woman to give birth was 31. The generation before that, it was 22.
Yeah.
The more we progress, the less important it is for people to have kids. Expense is a huge problem for that, but I love my son, don't get me wrong, I do love him, but it's a pain in the neck. And he's a pain in the neck, he's expensive, my whole life has to revolve around him.
Outside, poor thing. Stephanie, just quickly, we're running out of time, unfortunately. I mean, you know, Miriam is right. We do need to help people. I mean, you know, better housing.
We do.
For women at work.
And that's it. And I feel from, like, a female's perspective, there needs to be better education for women, because in high school, they tell us, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant. So now women have this messaging in their head, I'm going to work in my career for as long as possible, get money, then have children. They leave it late, and then they find they're having fertility problems. So we need better education for women to say, you know what, if you want to have kids at a later time, freeze your eggs, plan your finances. And what is happening now? We're having an epidemic of women in their 30s and 40s who want children but can't find Mr. Right and can't afford to have kids on their own.
Yeah, indeed.
I think there's not enough good men as well.
Yes.
Yeah, genuinely.
Ladies, his volunteer. You heard it here first. JJ and Siobi, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have the both of you on. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's packed show. The King Down Under. Sounds vaguely rude, doesn't it? King Charles and Queen Camilla continue their 6-day tour in Australia. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
We shouldn't have to do this, Rebecca. These men should have been compensated long ago.
They shouldn't have to fight for recognition. And this is what's happened over the last 72 years. So all the way through from the test through to the present day, they've known that something happened to them. They've seen what they've been through, their medical conditions, the fact that many of these servicemen died well before their time. And they were ignored in a way that other countries didn't ignore their similar testing veterans. So other nuclear powers across the world, the US, for example, compensated and recognised their nuclear testing veterans many, many years ago. Yet, unfortunately, successive governments in the UK failed to do that. After the long campaign for medallic recognition, finally, these servicemen received medallic recognition, but it came in a jiffy bag in the post, which is not the way to honour the service that these men gave to our country. There needs to be an understanding and an uncovering of the truth of what they actually went through. They've been fighting for many years for access to their medical records, for example, urine and blood tests that they know were taken during their service. But when many of these families have tried to access their records, these test results seem to be missing, and there's no explanation as to why this has happened.
What basis does the Ministry of Defence say it's not our responsibility?
Well, we know from other studies across the world and subsequent studies, it showed, staggeringly, that these men were exposed to the same amount of radiation as clean-up workers at Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, there you are. Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, the King and Queen have spent their first night in Australia ahead of the royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. Royal correspondent Cameron Walken has the story for us.
Good morning. Well, welcome to base camp of the Australian Monarchist League here in Sydney. King Charles arrived in the country last night with Queen Camilla, and their job over the next 6 days is to volunteer, handing out flags to Australian citizens who have gathered to welcome King Charles and Queen Camilla. Australian monarchist T-shirts ready for the volunteers to collect. Not only are they volunteering and getting briefed on how to perhaps be as patriotic as possible to the King and Queen, there's also a little bit of a brunch, and I'm very jealous because there's champagne on offer, there's Pimm's and lemonade, and there's croissants and all the rest of it as well. So they're certainly not going hungry here today. I'm delighted to introduce you to now Alexander Volts, who is... Hello, Alexander.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, very well.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. So Alexander is the spokesperson for the Australian Monarchist League, and Alexander, it's a really significant time, the fact that it's the first king ever on Australian soil.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as you can see here, the Australian Monarchist League is out in full force celebrating what is a momentous occasion. I think the tour is going to go really well. We're very optimistic, and at the end of the day, it's a reminder of the significance of our system and just how wonderful it is for this country.
And you're going to have lots of volunteers out and about at the engagements, aren't you? Perhaps being patriotic with all the flags being handed out.
Well, that's certainly the intention. I mean, we love a bit of patriotism in the Monarchist League. We're very proud of our country. We love being Australian. We love our King and Queen of Australia. And so, yes, we'll be distributing a lot of flags. I think we've got about 15,000 ready to go, and I think you've just had a look at them earlier. So, yeah, it's going to be very exciting indeed.
And there's been a lot of noise, hasn't there, around republicanism since this tour was announced. The Republicans in Australia calling it the farewell tour of Oz. How do you respond to that?
Oh, well, I think it's just a classic juvenile Republican campaign once again. Very sleepy, not very interesting. I would like to hear the Republicans tell us how they're going to make our country better than what it already is. And instead of them just attacking people like me and attacking our system of government, which we know through history works so well, what are they going to change for the better? They can't tell us. They've never been able to tell us, so we're just not very interested in them, and we're having a wonderful celebration for the tour.
When King Charles stood off the Australian Air Force flight at the airport in Sydney last night, all the politicians are, I believe, Republicans, aren't they? So what do you make of that kind of image, alongside, of course, the Governor General? It's a bit odd, isn't it?
Well, the Republicans are the first to criticise the status quo and what we've got, and yet they're the first ones to queue up to meet the royal family. They're the first ones to take their Order of Australia gongs, which is, of course, in the King's name. So, look, it's just a display of hypocrisy, which we know is so prevalent amongst the Republican movement, and no one should be surprised that that's what's happened.
Great, thank you so much, Alexander. Appreciate your time. Well, the King has 6 days worth of engagements here in New South Wales, Sydney and Canberra, and we'll be here all week giving you the absolute latest on the King's Royal Tour.
Thank you very much, Cameron, doing an absolutely cracking job down there, isn't he? Now, and also amazing that Charles and Camilla, at their ages, are travelling all that way, and it's a lot of hard work. Talking of ages, there's a reason I mentioned that, because I just wanted to read this particular message out from Louise. Good afternoon, Louise. Louise, I was feeling reasonably good this morning, but the post has just arrived, and one letter was the one informing me about the winter fuel allowance. As a new pensioner, I had every hope this would help a little towards my bottled gas central heating, particularly after the Tories robbed the 150 fuel assistance. So thank you very much, all you rich MPs of absolutely no understanding of how the rest of us try to manage. Louise, thank you very much. Really appreciate that message. OK, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News at the weekend, but let's have a quick look at what the weather is doing for you, shall we?
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front.
Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Ashley arriving overnight tonight, bringing some very wet and windy weather, particularly across western parts of the UK. It's currently out in the Atlantic, moving its way towards us. We do have a very brief ridge of high pressure developing through this evening, bringing us some more settled conditions. And a frontal band out in the very far southeast will bring some rain for a time across southeastern parts of England. But otherwise, a mostly dry start to the night, maybe 1 or 2 showers across western parts of the UK, but generally starting dry. However, cloud increasing as we see that area of rain associated with the storm Ashley arriving through the early hours of Sunday morning. It will be quite a mild night, particularly under all that cloud and rain, temperatures holding up in the double figures in some spots. But it's those winds that will really start to pick up as we go through the early hours of Sunday morning. Quite widely 50 to 60 miles an hour across those Irish Sea coastal regions, and some heavy rain associated with that too, particularly over the high ground of Scotland, northern parts of England. As that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, there will be some sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland as we start on Sunday morning, but generally for much of England and Wales, it will be a cloudy and damp start to the day. As those winds pick up through Sunday morning, that area of rain will push its way eastwards quite quickly. It's still turning heavy at times, but there'll be some sunny spells developing behind that frontal band of rain. Across the northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will see those winds really starting to pick up, and for western parts of Scotland, we could see gusts up to 70 or 80 miles an hour. And in association with some high spring tides, that could lead to some coastal impacts. Temperatures still a little above average for the time of year, but definitely feeling cooler than Saturday with those strong winds. The next area of rain then arrives as we go through Sunday evening, particularly for Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, seeing the heavy outbreaks of rain through Sunday night and into the start of Monday. It will then remain unsettled as we go through the first part of next week, but temperatures still a little above average for the time of year.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with. Make sure you don't miss out. Get your entry in now. Just one entry could make you the winner. For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word, because it's an ending, and it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in, but it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 19th of October. I know, where is the month going? It's nearly Halloween, which is why I've come dressed as a pumpkin. This is the weekend on GB News. Loads coming up on a packed show. Labour's war on families, inheritance tax, school tax, stamp duty, national insurance, and even more tax on the family car are all on the table as we edge closer to the Halloween budget from hell. Does the Treasury have the family in its crosshair zone? And was One Direction star Liam Payne badly let down by the music industry? Sharon Osbourne and Simon Cowell have spoken out. I'll be joined by author and music historian Leslie Ann Jones in a great exclusive later on the show. And the King Down Under, King Charles and Queen Camilla, continue their 6-day tour of Australia as they are greeted by the country's Prime Minister and a torrential rainstorm. Meanwhile, Prince Harry has been showing off his impressive, there you can see him, his impressive surfing skills. Not bad, is he? And should we be teaching school kids about British values? Former Home Secretary Lord Blunkett seems to think so and says we might live to regret it if we don't. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. So I hope you're having a smashing weekend out there. Thank you for joining me on this Saturday lunchtime. Really appreciate your company because this show is all about you. And loads of you have been getting in touch already and I want you to continue doing so. What we're talking about, what you want to talk about, what's important to you, loads of you are getting in touch. Labour voters about feeling let down by the Labour government and what's coming up in the budget. And if you want to join in the conversation, join in the show, here's how you do it. Really, really simple. It's gbnews.com/your-say and have a chat with us. Let us know what you're thinking, because, you know, you're the people that should be talking out and letting politicians in particular know how angry you are. Or maybe you're happy. Maybe you're satisfied with the way things are going. But let me know. gbnews.com/your-say. Cracking panel for you this hour as well. We have journalist and political consultant Emma Burnell and political commentator Chloe Dobbs. Thank you very much for joining me, ladies, this afternoon. But first, before we get stuck into all of those stories and really packed show, as I said, let's get the news with Will Hollis.
A very good afternoon to you. I'm Will Hollis with your top stories at just past 1 o'clock. The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could save £7 billion in revenue if the freeze is extended until 2028. It could help plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the Labour promise not to raise taxes. Going down under, the King and Queen have spent their first night in Australia ahead of their royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker is in Sydney for us.
It's a rest day for the King and Queen's Day following their very long journey from the United Kingdom, partly a decision taken because of the King's cancer diagnosis, making sure he's got enough energy to carry out his engagements later on this week. The King and Queen has an informal cup of tea with the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese last night. Tomorrow they'll be attending a church service in northern Sydney where they are expected to meet members of the public.
Cameron is a very lucky boy. However, the visit prompts questions over the country's future as a constitutional monarchy, with calls for it to become a republic. Earlier, Cameron spoke to Alexander Volz from the Australian Monarchist League, who says support for the King and Queen is strong.
I think the tour is going to go really well. We're very optimistic, and at the end of the day, it's a reminder of the significance of our system and just how wonderful it is for this country. We love a bit of patriotism in the Monarchist League. We're very proud of our country. We love being Australian. We love our King and Queen of Australia. And so, yes, we'll be distributing a lot of flags. I think we've got about 15,000 ready to go.
Let's go to China now. The Foreign Secretary says British businesses are seeking stability and clarity with the country. David Lammy is on a two-day visit to China. Meanwhile, the Foreign Minister's Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, said that bilateral ties are at a new starting point and competition among major powers should not be the backdrop to the era. But David Lammy said by being there, the UK can raise issues it does not agree with.
There are areas where we can cooperate and collaborate with the Chinese, and I've been speaking to British businesses about how we do that. There are, of course, areas in which we will compete, and there are differences in areas in which we will challenge. Areas like Hong Kong, areas like Taiwan, areas like human rights in Xinjiang. We were able to have those conversations and raise difficult and challenging issues.
To the tragic death of pop star Liam Payne. The father of Liam Payne has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the Casa Sur Hotel, where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects in the room. His family have said they are heartbroken. In Israel, a drone strike on the holiday home of the Prime Minister has failed, sources say. Fired from neighbouring Lebanon, 3 drones were aimed at the town, say Syria, with 1 hitting a building and 2 intercepted. An Israeli spokesperson says Prime Minister Netanyahu was not in the vicinity at the time of the attack. There have been no reports, of casualties. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader says the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar will not halt its axis of resistance. Let's get back to the UK. A car being driven by a heavily pregnant woman flipped 3 times when it crashed with an unmarked police car in the south-east London area, according to an eyewitness. The witness told reporters he saw the police car driving on the wrong side of the road before it collided with her on Thursday night in Eltham. Both the woman and her baby sadly died from their injuries. 2 officers have since been discharged from hospital and an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has been launched. And finally, could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and reclining features. After backlash against some existing services where passengers compared seats to ironing boards, rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing seats. Well, those are your latest stories. We'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Will. OK, let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? Now, millions of taxpayers could find themselves paying a higher rate of tax after the budget. That's as the Chancellor prepares to extend the freeze on income tax threshold, which Labour previously criticised as being a self-tax. Do keep up at the back there. That's not to mention other policies, such as the proposed VAT on private school fees, which Labour intend to implement. We did know about that one, though, didn't we? And this raises the question, is Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party effectively just declaring war on families, especially those working people families? Joining me now is former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. Ivor, was Labour's manifesto honest?
Yes is the answer to that, Dawn. And I fully expect that when we get to the point of the 30th of October, which seems a long way away at the moment, we will see all that when Rachel delivers the budget on that day. I have to say, I mean, there's been a lot of excitement amongst medias and all sorts of people about what might happen over the next, 10 days or so? It's going to be a long time over this next few days while we see all the possibilities. And of course, like most budgets, if you've experienced them over the years, which I've had the pleasure to do, I have to say, it's not always in there.
That so many people, Labour voters, people that voted for the Labour Party, are saying now they are disappointed. They feel shortchanged by what they are expecting Rachel Reeves to say in the budget.
I think the best thing to say is let's wait and actually see what the real budget is on the 30th, because until then we don't actually know. I accept entirely why there are people who have differences and they want to see different things in various ways. But, you know, we do have to wait for the budget in its real terms, not just the experiences that we read about in just about every newspaper every day. It's going to be another 9 or 10 days. Let's just experience that.
OK, are you happy, Ivor, with the way things are going?
I am. I think that Keir Starmer and the team and Rachel Reeves have had a good start. I think they've worked hard on a lot of issues. There's a huge number of changes which the Labour Party wants to bring in. It's going to take time. We know that. Nothing happens overnight in politics. It never has, and I can vouch for that. As a former defence minister, it's just how it works at Westminster. I think that when we get through to the budget and then onwards with all these other matters, I think we'll start to see the benefits that Labour is going to deliver over the next 4 or 5 years.
OK, Ivor, very quickly, we're running out of time now. Just one final answer from you. Lots of our viewers this afternoon, our pensioners, are saying they are devastated. They're getting their letters, dropping through the letterbox about the winter fuel payment. They are very angry, very upset and worried about how they're going to get through the winter. What would you say to them?
I'd say just hold on, because there's going to be more changes, and I think some of those will be very beneficial to pensioners.
OK, fine. Thank you very much. It's Ivor Kaplan, former Labour Minister. Thank you very much for joining me. OK, now, we also have one of those hints that might be changing in the budget is basically, it's called a holiday tax. So joining me now is a travel correspondent at The Independent, the wonderful Simon Calder, who has got brilliant hiking boots on under the table. I'm sorry, I'm giving it. He looks very smart, but hiking boots, because that's what he does. Simon, Rachel Reeves considering putting up her... it's been dubbed as a holiday tax, basically, making it more expensive to fly. What do you make of this one?
OK, so air passenger duty came in almost 30 years ago. It was actually a Conservative Chancellor, Ken Clarke, who thought, oh, flying looks a bit cheap, I'm going to put a tax on it. Since then, chancellors have just loved it, partly because it kind of gets hidden. You get the headline airfare and you don't actually know that, for example, if you are paying on you're going premium economy to somewhere like Hong Kong or Singapore, you're paying upwards of £200 in tax. And the other great thing about it, from a chancellor's point of view, is that half the people who pay it are foreign, because they're coming to Britain and paying it when they go home, because it only works in one direction. And guess what? They don't vote. So it's a tax where you're going to cheese off a few people, but you're probably going to get away with it. And I've been looking at the tax returns. The chance that the Office for Budget Responsibility says that it's going to raise about £4.5 billion this year, which sounds like a lot of cash. However, it's only 0.4% of all the tax take. And I can imagine a meeting where the Chancellor is sitting around with Treasury officials and saying, OK, we've ruled out this tax and this tax. what have we got left? And somebody will say, oh, air passenger duty. Oh, could we get an extra 1/3 or 50% out of that? Yeah, we probably could. So I think it is almost unthinkable that we will not see rises. The only question is how much they will be and when they will take effect.
Will this have an effect on the travel industry?
Well, they are absolutely furious. They say that this is a tax. Michael O'Leary, in fact, just speaking in the last couple of days, says that air passenger duty is a tax on working people because, frankly, rich people don't care.
Yes.
They don't notice it, but families most certainly do. However, it stayed for outbound flights at £13 for a good number of years. And I think if you just push that up by a couple of pounds, yes, it'll be annoying, but frankly, you won't notice. That's not even half a cup of airport coffee these days. And so since about 90% of all the people pay the lower rate anyway, compared with the extra you pay when you're going in business class, I think it will go up. And possibly they might take this opportunity to make the whole thing a lot more sensible. For instance, a family of 5 people, they want to go somewhere lovely like Malaysia. If they start their journey at almost any UK airport, they will pay £1,000 if they're going in premium economy for air passenger duty alone. If they start from Inverness, they pay no tax.
Right.
Yes, exactly. That's because it's a Highland and Island airport, and that's always been the case. So I think loopholes like that might be excluded, because at the moment you get quite a lot of people traipsing up to beautiful Inverness.
Sounds like a good idea.
Only to turn around and leave. If you want to go to Inverness, that's great, but don't go there just as a tax avoidance measure. The other thing is, the last few times I've flown across the Atlantic, I've got a cheap flight to Dublin to avoid all but £13 of air passenger duty, and I've just flown from there, and I think there will be more of that going on.
Right, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Simon. The wonderful Simon Calder, and just very quick, where are you off to next, Simon?
I'm lucky enough to be going to Nepal on Wednesday, and I'm just breaking in my my hiking
That's why
boots.
he's wearing hiking boots. Thank you very much, Simon. Have a brilliant trip, and getting in that flight before you've got to pay extra for it.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now, lots of you have been sending in your thoughts, and many are very angry about the winter fuel tax, and it's like, please, can you ask Labour why they're doing this? I'm very upset. I mean, I honestly, so many of you getting in touch. I will read as many as I possibly can out. I mean, it's just devastating your stories, but do keep your stories coming in. It's very simple to do so. gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation. Or message me on our socials at GBNews. OK, so now we are going to... Our panel are coming back in the room. We have Emma Burnell and Chloe Dodds are with me. Ladies, we have been discussing the tax increases that are on all the front pages today, and we have just had the wonderful Simon Calder talking about the holiday tax, a tax on duty when you fly away. What do you make, Emma, first, of what we are thinking we are going to get in the budget as far as tax raises are concerned?
So I think that Labour are in a very, very difficult position because the public want two very, very contradictory things. The number one thing that anyone raises, if you look at polling, is the state of public services. The NHS is on its knees. Schools are literally falling down. We're having to release people early from prison because there aren't the spaces. And that costs money. And the only way that governments can raise money is through taxation. And there are long-term plans for more of that to come. So if the economy grows, then there will be more taxation coming in. But in the immediate term, all of these crises that have built up over many, many years will need some very quick solutions. And there is a big black hole. And I know we argue about how big that is, but I don't think anyone says there isn't a black hole. In terms of what the funding, the difference between what needs to be spent on, for example, making sure we're running our courts properly, and what actually money there is in the Justice Department. So that's the one side, we need the more income side. The other side is that we are in a cost of living crisis, and we have seen tax rises. There were a couple of mooted tax cuts by Jeremy Hunt under the last government. Absolutely didn't move the dial at all in terms of where people voted. That wasn't electorally significant. And Labour put themselves into quite a narrow bind by saying they wouldn't do taxes on working people, which they defined as national insurance, and are saying now, and again, this is disputed, but it's a grey area, that's the national insurance contribution that we make from our pay packets rather than employers make, because that's what we feel.
They weren't specific about that in the
manifesto. They were not specific about
it. Do you think, Chloe, coming to you now, but the manifesto, lots of people saying the manifesto was basically a bunch of lies. Do you think the manifesto was a little bit duplicitous here? We weren't given the small print, but you shouldn't have to be given the small print in a manifesto. You should be told the truth, surely.
Yeah, I mean, the Labour Party, whilst the Tories were in power, were telling us, we are going to be honest politicians, we're going to get rid of sleaze, we're going to be honest, we're going to serve the people, we're not going to be self-serving, and then they have shown themselves to be absolute hypocrites. Now, Laura is absolutely right that Emma. I told you, Laura.
I'll be Laura, it's more interesting.
I quite like Laura, actually.
Emma has, rightly pointed out that Labour is in a very difficult position. It's very hard to figure out how can we fix these failing public services and whatnot. But I wish that Labour had at least been honest before and said, you know what, when we're going to come in, it's going to be really difficult. It is going to be a painful budget, and actually just tell the truth. But they figured out that won't win a general election, so we'll tell everyone everything's rosy, we'll just have a magic money tree, we'll fix the NHS, we'll fix education, and everything will be happy days. They've come in and shown that's not the case. My other problem with these tax rises is I think a lot of them are not necessarily always well thought out, and some of them are ideological. Specifically, for example, the private school tax rate. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but it seems like from the predictions we have, this is not really going to be much of a revenue raiser, and it's just kind of a crackdown on, evil elite people with money.
We did see Bridget Phillipson's tweet, and it did sound a bit, astroturf and sort of like embossed notepaper.
And that might be the case for some big ones like Harrow and Eton, but there are a lot of small private schools just trying to balance the books.
Politics of envy rather than the politics of education. But we are going to come back to this, but for now, thank you very much. I'm Dawn Newsom, this is GBNews, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Talking of schools, should we be teaching school children about British values? Former Home Secretary Lord Blunkett seems to think so and says we might live to regret it if we don't. What do you make to that one? All of that and much more to come. This is GBNews, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
This is GBNews, Britain's news channel.
We're talking catchphrases and jingles because, of course, instantly recognisable and sometimes a little annoying in the case of the Go Compare one, perhaps. An iconic advertising jingle can stay in your head all day and sometimes stand the test of time. Sound expert and music designer for some of the world's most renowned companies, Michael Boumendil, joins us now. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
First of all, what is the secret ingredient, the secret recipe for a hit jingle that stands the test of time over the decades?
Well, I have to say that secret 100 years ago is not the secret today, because today all the brands are using music. So the first secret is to stand out, is to make something different, to do something interesting. The other thing I believe is to do something that is true to the brand that is talking to you. It's not only about the memorability, but it's about telling something about the brand. When I hear you, your voice, your tone of voice says not only who you are, I can recognize your voice, but it says a lot about your mood, your personality. So the other reason why we make successful jingles is because they're catchy, because they're different, but also because they say something to us that is interesting, and finally keeping this link between the brand and the customers.
Michael, tell us about your involvement in the new Maybelline jingle. This makes me, I haven't heard it, but it makes me a little bit sad because I was an avid Maybelline concealer user for many years. Other brands are available, but the jingle was the main reason why I got bought into it.
You don't have to be sad, because we kept most of the legacy.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GBNews, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, there you are. Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Dressed in orange, I went out the door today, got to tell you this, and the husband said, "Oh, you look like a pumpkin." Ladies, how would you react to that one? I'm asking you. Right, no, I don't think it's a term of endearment, to be honest with you. OK, now, Labour peer Lord Blunkett has proposed that British values must be taught in schools, warning the UK will regret it if not, following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies. I said that in inverted commas, by the way, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever. So we're asking, should schools teach British values? Or would that be a step backwards for our education system? Joining me now is historian and broadcaster, one of my favourite people, Rafe Haydel-Mancu. Rafe, thank you very much for coming in. Lovely to have you in the studio. British values in school. What do you make of this one?
Well, not for the first time. Lord Blunkett is correct, but for the wrong reasons. Western values are under attack and under threat. And I say Western values because these values that they're talking about, democracy, free speech, tolerance, you know, they apply just as much to the Swedes and the Dutch and the Canadians as they do to us. These are about Western civilized values, and they are under threat. But they're not under threat from this so-called far right. They're under threat from the far left and from radical Islam. These are mountains compared to the far-right molehill. We have the most radically left-wing youth in history. We've never seen such extreme radical left-wing views being held.
What makes you say that, Rafe, by the way?
Was that?
What makes you say that we have the most radical left?
Well, all of the evidence. I've written a chapter on this, actually, on the left stranglehold over education more broadly, and it mirrors the rise of left-wing teachers as well at the same time. But, for example, more British youth think that protecting free speech is less important than not causing offence and stopping hate speech. And, of course, their definition of hate speech is so loose that it would encompass the everyday conversations of most viewers of this channel. And at the same time, of course, vast swathes of British Muslim youth hold far more extreme and intolerant and undemocratic views than even their parents or grandparents. So we do have to have a robust defence of Western values and a robust promotion. Otherwise, in the next 20 or 30 years to come, we'll be living in a dystopian future where all of these values are completely denigrated. And one of the ways I've written about this in the past, one of the things you need to do is you need to teach both citizenship classes and history classes where the long, hard struggle to the freedoms and democracy we enjoy today is taught, from Magna Carta through women's suffrage and universal suffrage, and also what happens if you lose those, so teaching about what happened behind the Iron Curtain in the communist world, you know, referencing to Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago and so forth. And at the same time, from the ages of 10 to 16, I've also said that you need to have compulsory debates in classrooms where children have to debate from a position opposite to the one they would normally hold. That builds resilience in them, and that teaches them that opposing viewpoints do have validity. But none of this can happen if you don't actually tackle the teaching profession too, and the teacher training processes, because in the last 30 years, we've seen teaching profession go from being fairly balanced when I was at school to now over 90% of teachers vote for left-wing and centre-left parties. And a lot of that is because of the teacher training institutions, or woke madrasas, as I call them now. That's essentially, these are indoctrination camps, because teachers used to be trained in independent teacher training colleges, which worked very well. But ever since university departments of education took them over, these are the most left-wing elements of any university, we've seen the shocking rise in far far-left groupthink, fueled also by places like the National Education of Union, which promotes decolonizing the curriculum, and actually just recently put out a whole document about fighting fascism for its teachers.
What do you think, just quickly, Rafe, we are running out of time here. Jackie Smith, Lady Smith as she now is, she has said in response to this that schools should have some autonomy in the area. They need to be free to embed the values in a way that meets the needs of their pupils. What do you think she means by that?
Well, I'm sorry, we can't have autonomy in our teaching profession until we actually get a better balance. I'm not calling for, for right-wing teaching or for left-wing teaching. We want a balance, and unfortunately, we cannot entrust the future of our democracy to a teaching profession now that teaches slanted history, because we know from white supremacy to white privilege to decolonization, these are concepts that are now being taught to our children. And too much of the focus on our children is about universities. As I like to say, when the hair is blue, there's nothing you can do. You need to focus on children in primary schools, and we need to just restore balance, because we want children to be able to make up their own minds, to be taught how to think and not what to think.
Do you think, Rafe, I mean, how do we ensure that this is being done and in the right way? Do you think there should be some sort of testing brought in, like an exam, about British values or Western values, as you would say?
No, I think those things are meaningless. I think we simply need children to understand the long, hard struggle that it took us to get to where we are, to teach respect, and actually also, in many ways, to actually engage with these ideas by debating things openly rather than feeling that they can't talk about subjects. Because we know a lot of children don't feel they can actually have an opposing viewpoint to any issue because they'll be looked down upon not just by their pupils but often by teachers. And of course, we've had more and more evidence now that students learn by osmosis. Teachers aren't necessarily being political in the classroom, but the kids can understand where their teachers lie on the political spectrum and therefore believe that they are holding the wrong viewpoint if they disagree with them.
And just very, very finally, because I do find this fascinating, and this has been raised by one... Sorry, I've lost your name now. What if parents say, I do not want my child to be taught Western British values in school and I want to withdraw my child from that class?
Well, I'm sorry, we are living in the West. We must have a robust defence of British values and of British culture, of our customs and our norms. And one of the great problems today is we have spent too long in our education system elevating minority cultures over the overarching British monoculture. And that is why we're in the position we're in. We have turned love of nation into national self-loathing. And unfortunately, our teaching profession has been at the forefront, actually, of teaching children too much about the wrongs of our past, rather than celebrating our glorious history and the fact that Britain is, for example, the world's third least racist country, and yet the majority of British children believe that racism is the biggest issue, bigger than climate change. They think it's systemic racism in this country, even though we are the third least racist behind just Sweden and Brazil.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rafe. Very, very strong opinions, very strong words there. What do you think? Do you agree with Rafe? Do you think he's got a good point? Or do you think that maybe British values in schools, as one of you just messaged, we need to teach them reading and writing properly first? Easy to get involved at gbnews.com/say to join the conversation, or on our socials at GBNews. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is time for your news headlines. Love it.
Dawn, thank you. Your top stories at 1:30. The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could raise £7 billion in revenue if the freeze is extended until 2028. It could help plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances, with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the Labour promise not to raise taxes. To Australia, the King and Queen have spent their first night ahead of the royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. The Foreign Secretary says British businesses are seeking stability and clarity with China. David Lammy is on a 2-day visit to the country. The foreign minister's Chinese counterpart said that bilateral ties are at a new starting point and competition among major powers should not be the backdrop to the era. But David Lammy said by being there, the UK can also raise issues it does not agree with, like Taiwan and Hong Kong. The father of pop star Liam Payne has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the Casa Sur Hotel, where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects in the room. His family have said they are heartbroken. A car being driven by a heavily pregnant woman flipped 3 times in a crash with an unmarked police car in south-east London, according to an eyewitness. The witness told reporters he saw the police car driving on the wrong side of the road before it collided with her on Thursday night in Eltham. Both the woman and her baby died from their injuries. 2 officers have since been discharged from hospital and an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct has been launched. And finally, could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and reclining features. After backlash from some existing customers where passengers compared seats to ironing boards, rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing seats. And those are your top stories. I'll be back with more in 30 minutes.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So today should be a dry day for most of us. There will be some sunny spells around, but Storm Ashley arriving from the west overnight tonight brings some wet and windy weather. Situated out in the Atlantic at the moment, we do have this ridge of high pressure ahead of Storm Ashley. A weather front out towards the southeast will bring some remnants of some cloud and rain for the southeastern parts of England this afternoon, perhaps turning heavy at times here. But for much of the rest of the UK, there will be plenty of sunny spells around, maybe 1 or 2 isolated showers, particularly southwest England, Wales, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too, but they should be few and far between. Temperatures today a little above average for the time of year, 16 or 17 degrees in the south and 13 or 14 degrees further north, so feeling quite pleasant in any of that sunshine. The rain in the far southeast eventually clears its way eastwards as we head in towards this evening, leaving a dry start to the night for most of us. There will still be 1 or 2 showers around, particularly across western parts of the UK, particularly northwestern parts of Scotland seeing 1 or 2 showers, but quite a mild end to the day with those temperatures well into the double figures. As we then go through the rest of the night, we see what those showers continuing across western parts of Scotland, but clouds starting to build from the southwest as we see this initial band of rain associated with Storm Ashley pushing its way eastwards into the early hours of the morning. As this initial band of rain arrives, we do see those winds starting to pick up, particularly through Irish sea coasts. We could see gusts here of around 50 to 60 miles per hour. Generally quite a mild night though, under all that cloud and particularly those strong winds in the west. We could see the odd touch of frost across the very far east of Scotland, but generally a mild start to the day on Sunday. That band of rain pushes its way eastwards quite quickly due to those brisk westerly winds, but the winds really picking up across the northwest as we head through Sunday afternoon. We could see gusts here of 70 to 80 miles per hour, so there could be some disruption associated with those winds. Another mild day, temperatures still above average, but feeling cooler than Saturday.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Now, before the news, we were discussing British values with the brilliant Rafe Howler-Mancu, as Labour peer Lord Blunkett has proposed that British values must be taught in schools, warning the UK will regret it if not. Now, I know what one of my panel will be making of that one. I think she's probably spitting feathers now that we have Emma Belnell and Chloe Dawes. So I am going to come to you. Actually, I'm going to come to you first, Chloe, on this one, because I know Emma with building up a head of steam on this one. What did you make about, well, A, what Lord Blunkett has said, that British values are important, we need to teach them in schools, and what you heard Rafe say?
I think that Rafe was right in saying that this guy is right for the wrong reasons. We do need to teach British values in schools, but I don't think that that is because there is this huge rise of the far right in schools. I teach kids, I teach maths, and they all come to me saying, oh, you know, our teachers are ridiculous. They're telling us that we can't say anything about Andrew Tate. We can't talk about Andrew Tate. We can't look up to him because these teachers, they've seen one clip online of him saying women can't park or something like that, and they don't listen to most of what Andrew is saying, telling kids to be hardworking, don't be a victim, you know, work out, make money, this sort of thing, right? I think that it's not just free speech, like Rafe was talking about. I think it's very, very important because, especially when they get to universities, the kids are an absolute nightmare now, just wanting to no platform everybody. It's free speech, but I think it's other things like queuing, for example. Kids need to learn to queue, to be polite, queue up properly for their lunch.
That's a really good point. What is it with pushing in?
Yeah, I mean, in my school, the kids were all breaking arms and stuff, pushing everyone through the queue. It was an absolute nightmare. I think a lot of people feel like kids these days, they're just feral. It is the parents as well, but also in school, it's too soft. There needs to be a bit of discipline.
But as a teacher, what did you make of Rafe saying that teachers are literally indoctrinated in the left wing now?
I think that a lot of them are, not all of them. I had some good teachers, some bad teachers, but I think when I went to school, I was lucky that the teachers that I had, even if I knew that they were left-wing, they were quite good, for example, my history teachers, at explaining both sides of the argument. But I think the impression I'm getting is that nowadays that's very much shifting, where they're just giving their side of the argument. And especially as Rafe pointed out, there's very much an anti-West mentality. And if they talk about our past, they'll just look at the bad bits. They won't look at the good things that Britain has done. And I'm not saying that they should just show the good things that Britain has done, and it's just like, oh, we love the monarchy, we love colonialism and all of this. But they should show both sides, because we've got a generation that hates the West now, and that's going to lead to the West's fall. We'll be taken over by radical Islam if it keeps going the way it's going.
Emma, we have a generation that hates this country, hates the British people, and we're being taken over by radical Islam. What do you make of that one?
I'm not going to swear, I promise.
That is
however British that is.
Very British, to be fair. British values include swearing.
It's just nonsense. It's absolute. Look, there are. How do you define British values of freedom of speech and tolerance of difference of opinion without accepting that you will disagree with some of those opinions? I think there are certain things that you are right about in terms of, I think, when you're teaching history or sociology, there will be anyone who's come into that subject enough to care about it will probably have their own opinions, but they do need to be able to display different perspectives on it and to say, you know, if go and do further reading, to be able to mark an essay that says, this is what X says, this is what Y says about it, and these are the strengths and weaknesses of each of those arguments. That's important. But, I mean, I would say, particularly, Chloe, that for me, if we're ever talking about a shared set of values, that would probably include being critical of someone who was under arrest for people trafficking, sexual assault.
Andrew Tate, you're talking
Andrew
about.
Tate.
Yeah.
I'm just, well,
so
that's fine.
think
they can have a conversation about it, right? But don't say to children, you're not allowed to talk about this individual. You've got teachers that are saying that Andrew Tate is banned. in schools,
Well,
right?
I think
and just giving their opinion on it, right?
But I mean, Andrew Tate being banned, like, I wouldn't expect teachers to be showing them videos of Jimmy Savile either.
I'm not telling them. I'm not telling them to hit them about Andrew Tate, right? They should be teaching them their history, their geography, whatever. But don't ban children from talking about it. And just on that point of having conversation, I think a great thing also would be if more schools had debating societies. Often they're just in private schools, but I think they are absolutely fantastic. Debating in school was brilliant for me because you're given a side of an argument, often the side you completely disagree with, and told, right, stand there for 5 minutes and defend that side. And that's how you learn both sides of an argument, and that really fosters a belief in free speech. And
I fully believe in free speech, and I do agree that debating and that kind of soft skill, I think it's known as within the teaching, is really important, because a lot of what you get at the private schools is not so much that you're taught a different curriculum, but you're given all of those additional things that give people sometimes unearned confidence. I mean, I've worked in and around Westminster for 20 years, and I can tell you that some of the people I've met who were privately educated were significantly less clever than some other people I've met in my life, but they were bloody confident. And that is what I think a lot of what is given and inculcated in children. I would like to see all children given that opportunity, and I think debating clubs is a great way of doing that. It's not going to be for everybody. You need to find different ways of bringing out different skills and different confidences. You know, not every kid is going to be fully verbal in those terms. But I do think, I mean, one of the things they've talked about recently, the government, is oracy, and that is exactly, debating clubs would be a great way of improving people's oracy.
OK, brilliant. Thank you very much, ladies. We have to move on for now. But join the debate. It is important. It is important to listen to all sides of the story. gbnews.com/your say to join in our conversation. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. It's the weekend and there's loads more coming up on today's show. UK is not good news, preparing for Storm Ashley, expected to bring winds of 80 miles an hour. I'll be joined by meteorologist John Hammond to explain what to expect. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You could, if you're getting a bit bored later on and you've got some free time, tune in to Friends. Do you remember that?
It's on somewhere in the world all the time.
Probably one of those obscure TV channels.
It's a big anniversary today, because apparently today was 30 years ago, was when it first hit the screens.
In 1994. Just before, or just after I was born, 89 me. The show ran for 10 series, becoming one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, and it scored numerous accolades, including 62 Primetime Emmy nominations. Joining us now in the studio to talk everything Friends and the big anniversary is showbiz reporter Steph Tetchy and my friend as well.
Happy Friends anniversary, guys. Yes, today is quite a monumental day for one of the most incredible sitcoms to ever hit our TV screens.
That it's on somewhere in the world.
There's millions of people around the world who are watching reruns, watching either streaming of Friends, and it doesn't get boring for people. I think, 30 years later, just that it's such a simple concept. 6 New Yorkers just following their lives and their friendships. It proved a hit with loads of viewers worldwide.
The casting was super.
It was so incredible, and the thing is, these were all fresh faces at the time. It wasn't like they picked people who were at the top of the game then. And I think it was such a hit with viewers is because they became our friends as well over the years. But obviously today is played with a bit of poignancy because, there is one friend that is missing. And the creators of the show, Martha Kaufman and David Crane, saying that today is a bit fraught for both the cast because of Matthew Perry's passing. And he was known as one of the funniest friends, as most people would describe him as. And so today is kind of marred with sadness.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson, and I am convinced that the husband really does hate me. He's just messaged me with the score from the Tottenham Hotspur West Ham match, and as a West Ham fan, I didn't want to hear that, so thank you. And that was after he called me a pumpkin this morning. In any case, now lots of you have been getting in touch with your messages, and certainly on that last debate, again, really ticked all your boxes here about whether we should teach British values in school. James has said you will never ever be able to teach British values in a UK school while we're importing on industrial scale imports from every Islamic country on the planet. Strong opinions, but that's what this show is about. Do you agree? Do you agree with James? Did you agree with Rafe? Did you agree with Emma? gbnews.com/your say. And this is Shushi Johnson says, I had 2 teachers talking at me last month. Both thought kids' bad behaviour was down to Andrew Tate. Well, I mean, what can you say? What do you reckon? gbnews.com/your say. Lots of you want to get involved. Send all those messages in and join the conversation. Now, let's talk about the weather, because one of the British traditions that we are so good at is talking about the weather, isn't it? And we moan about it on average 3 times a day. That's astonishing. But the UK is preparing for Storm Ashley. It's the first named storm of the season. Not very scary, is it, Ashley? And it's expected to bring winds of 80 miles an hour this weekend. An amber weather warning is in place for parts of Scotland, with the Met Office even cautioning about power outages, transport disruption and potential building damage. Dangerous coastal conditions are anticipated, with large waves and debris posing life risk in exposed areas. Oh, my Lord. Scotland and Northern Ireland are expected to experience the worst of the severe weather, and that is coming tomorrow on Sunday. Joining me now is meteorologist at Weather Trending, John Hammond. John, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. So we have Storm Ashley. Doesn't sound that scary, but it does sound like it's going to be quite a bad one in some parts of the country.
Yeah, hi, Dawn. And you nailed it. In some parts of the country. For those of you watching across much of the UK, let me allay your fears, because the sorts of wind speed which Dawn just mentioned there will only be affecting the west of Scotland and the most exposed parts of the west of Scotland. For most of us, actually, Dawn, it's going to be a fairly standard wet and windy day tomorrow. Let me paint the bigger picture. We've got an area of low pressure, which is what you hear weather presenters talking about a lot. But this one is really going to explode into life over the next 24 hours and surge its way up to the far northwest of the UK through tomorrow. And it's here, as you can see on the graphic, where the warnings are in force. We've got a yellow warning. That's the lowest tier of warning for Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the most northwestern parts of England and Wales. But we have an amber warning for westernmost parts of mainland Scotland and the Hebrides. Now, what sort of impacts will those sort of wind speeds bring? I'm expecting certainly ferries not to be running across the west of Scotland. I'm expecting bridge closures, and certainly the possibility of some power outages, temporarily at least. And obviously there will be some travel disruption as well. 80 miles an hour across this part of the world, not unheard of. It happens typically a few times every winter. As you said, Dawn, this is the first one of the new season. The season starts in September and goes all the way around to next August. So Ashley is the first one, the first of several, no doubt, as we go through the winter months. But yeah, some very wet and windy weather. The rain more widespread across the country tomorrow. We're going to see a batch of heavy rain sweeping eastwards through tomorrow morning, and then another batch of heavy rain following on behind across those northwestern areas. And actually, the rainfall is more of a concern in some respects. It's a slow burner given how wet the last 12 months has been. So these sorts of scenes we've become used to, haven't we, in the last year or so, given the amount of rain we've seen. We don't really want to be going into the winter half of the year with groundwater levels, river levels, reservoir levels very high indeed. Any extra rainfall, if we have a very wet winter, for example, that's of real concern, certainly to the Environment Agency. But let's not get carried away. Over the next 24 hours, probably the most impactful weather will be the wind, and it is the far northwest of the UK which will bear the brunt. Actually, Ashley's not going to hang around, Dawn. It will clear off tomorrow night, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, and I know some kids are on half term next week, there are signs that the weather will settle down with drier, calmer, brighter weather as we go through next week, but not over the next 24 hours.
So it's actually, just quickly, John, it's actually maybe looking quite good for Halloween, for all the trick-and-treaters going out?
Yeah, actually, although that's still some way off, Dawny, I'll stick my neck out and say that it won't be as wild, wet and windy as it is right now. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the trick-or-treaters will be enjoying some calmer weather come Halloween.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's John Hammond there. Thank you very much for joining us with all the details of Storm Ashley. So if you are up in Scotland and North West, be careful. Take care of yourself. Right, I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. There's loads more coming up on today's packed show. But first, let's take a look at what the weather is like right now where you are and what it's going to be like for the rest of the weekend for you. Here is your weather forecast.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Ashley arriving overnight tonight, bringing some very wet and windy weather, particularly across western parts of the UK. It's currently out in the Atlantic, moving its way towards us. We do have a very brief ridge of high pressure developing through this evening, bringing us some more settled conditions. And a frontal band out in the very far southeast will bring some rain for a time across southeastern parts of England. But otherwise, a mostly dry start to the night, maybe one or two showers across western parts of the UK, but generally starting dry. However, cloud increasing as we see that area of rain associated with the Storm Ashley arriving through the early hours of Sunday morning. It will be quite a mild night, particularly under all that cloud and rain, temperatures holding up in the double figures in some spots. But it's those winds that will really start to pick up as we go through the early hours of Sunday morning. Quite widely, 50 to 60 miles an hour across those Irish Sea coastal regions, and some heavy rain associated with that too, particularly over the high ground of Scotland, northern parts of England. As that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, there will be some sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland as we start on Sunday morning, but generally for much of England and Wales, it'll be a cloudy and damp start to the day. As those winds pick up through Sunday morning, that area of rain will push its way eastwards quite quickly. It's still turning heavy at times, but there'll be some sunny spells developing behind that frontal band of rain. Across the northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will see those winds really starting to pick up, and for western parts of Scotland we could see gusts up to 70 or 80 miles an hour, and in association with some high spring tides that could lead to some coastal impacts. Temperatures still a little above average for the time of year, but definitely feeling cooler than Saturday with those strong winds. The next area of rain then arrives as we go through Sunday evening, particularly for Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, seeing the heavy outbreaks of rain through Sunday night and into the start of Monday. It will then remain unsettled as we go through the first part of next week, but temperatures still a little above average for the time of year.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway, and you really could be next.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. Winning the money enabled me to treat my children, which I've not been able to do for a while. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. with, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close 5 p.m. this Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 19th of October. I have no idea how we're halfway through the month already. This is the weekend on GB News, and I'm Dawn Neeson. Now, Labour's war on families, inheritance tax, school tax, stamp duty, national insurance, and even more tax on the family car are all on the table as we edge closer to the Halloween budget from hell. But does the Treasury have the family in its crosshairs? And was One Direction star Liam Payne badly let down by the music industry? Sharon Osbourne and Simon Cowell have spoken out. I'll be joined by author and music historian Leslie Ann Jones later in the programme. And the King Down Under, King Charles and Queen Camilla continue their 6-day tour of Australia as they're greeted by the country's Prime Minister and a torrential rainstorm. Meanwhile, Prince Harry has been showing off his impressive surfing skills. There you go, you can see him there. And Keir Starmer has struck a Rwanda-style deal, hold on a minute, to deport migrants to St Helena. I wonder what the locals make of that one. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend. But I do say it every week, and I genuinely mean it, this show is all about you and your opinions. And we want to get your voices so we can get the people in power to listen to you. And this is how you get involved. It's really, really simple. Whatever we're talking about or anything you want to have a chat about, if you're feeling lonely at home, get in touch. Really, really simple to do so. gpnews.com/yoursay. Join in this conversation this afternoon, and I will read as many out as I have time to do so. Now, keeping me company this hour is we have a former Labour advisor, James Schneider. Thank you very much. And broadcaster and journalist, Claire Muldoon. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Good to have your company in the studio. But before we get stuck into today's story, it's a really packed show. You don't want to go anywhere. Let's get the news headlines with the lovely Will Heiss.
Dawn, thank you very much. At 2 o'clock, your top stories here in the GB newsroom.
The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could raise £7 billion in revenue if the freeze is extended until 2028. It could help plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the Labour promise not to raise taxes. Going down under, the King and Queen have spent their first night in Australia ahead of their royal tour of Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. However, the visit prompts questions over the country's future as a constitutional monarchy, with calls by some for it to become a republic. Earlier, GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker spoke to Alexander Volz from the Australian Monarchist League earlier, who says support for the King and Queen is strong.
I think the tour is going to go really well. We're very optimistic, and at the end of the day, it's a reminder of the significance of our system and just how wonderful it is for this country. We love a bit of patriotism in the Monarchist League. We're very proud of our country. We love being Australian. We love our King and Queen of Australia. And so, yes, we'll be distributing a lot of flags. I think we've got about 15,000 ready to go.
Now, the tragic story of the death of Liam Payne, the father of the pop star, has arrived in Argentina to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the hotel where the One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics, alcohol and destroyed objects in the room. His family have said they're heartbroken. Meanwhile, fans here in the UK have been laying tributes in the star's hometown of Wolverhampton, as GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson can tell us.
Well, flowers and tributes continue to be laid here in Wolverhampton today. Last night, over 100 people attended a vigil to let balloons go into the air, to light candles and pay their respects to the One Direction star Liam Payne, who passed away in Buenos Aires earlier this week. For many, Liam Payne is one of Wolverhampton's own, growing up in the Bushbury area of the city, and many an emotional One Direction fan coming here to pay their respects today.
The Foreign Secretary says British businesses are seeking stability and clarity with China. David Lammy is on a 2-day visit to the country. The Foreign Minister's Chinese counterpart said that bilateral ties are at a new starting point and competition among major powers should not be the backdrop to the era. But David Lammy said by being there, the UK can also raise issues it does not agree with.
There are areas where we can cooperate and collaborate with the Chinese, and I've been speaking to British businesses about how we do that. There are, of course, areas in which we will compete, and there are differences in areas in which we will challenge areas like Hong Kong, areas like Taiwan, areas like human rights in Xinjiang. We were able to have those conversations and raise difficult and challenging issues.
A drone strike on the holiday home of Israel's Prime Minister failed, sources say. Fired from neighbouring Lebanon, 3 drones were aimed at the town of Caesarea, with 1 hitting a building and 2 intercepted. An Israeli spokesperson says Prime Minister Netanyahu was not in the area at the time of the attack. There have been no reports of casualties. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader says the death of Yahya Sinwar, Hamas leader, will not halt its axis of resistance. And finally, could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and reclining features after backlash against some existing services where passengers compared seats to ironing boards. Rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing the seats. Well, good luck getting a seat when those services run. For now, we'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Will. And that is such an important point. You get lovely, comfy train seats, as Will just said. Good luck getting one. Normally, I'm standing outside the toilet with somebody else's suitcase shoved under my chin, literally. OK, thank you very much, Will. OK, let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? It's a very, very packed show, so we need to move fast through it. But I have a great panel for you. We have our the lovely Claire Muldoon and James Schneider joining me, talking about everything we're talking about. Now, millions of taxpayers could find themselves paying a higher rate of tax after the budget. That's as the Chancellor prepares to extend the freeze on income tax thresholds, which Labour previously criticised as being a stealth tax. So this raises the question, is Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party effectively declaring war on, you know, working people, the ones they said they were looking after? Joining me now, first of all, is former Labour spokesman James Matthewson. James, thank you very much for joining me on a Saturday afternoon. Lots of anger in the room from people that voted Labour. Lots of viewers are getting in touch saying, I didn't vote for this. People are worried about this budget. What do you make of what we're seeing in the papers today? And lots of people are saying Labour's manifesto wasn't entirely honest.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation. There's no denying it, I think, at the moment. And this is why the party, I believe, wanted to set out as early as possible this idea of, you know, pain and misery and suffering when Keir Starmer did his Rose Garden speech, kind of highlighting all of those challenges ahead in the budget. The problem is, from a PR and comms perspective, the timing of that was absolutely ridiculous because they did it far too early. And they started having a conversation about this budget that then put everybody on alert for this budget, being able to talk about very little else between then and now. So everybody has been waiting for this budget. Everyone is prepared for the fact that it's probably not going to be a very positive budget for them, and that everyone knows, you know, there's this spirit or this attitude of we're all in this together, to quote High School Musical. But, you know, you've got this idea that we're meant to be kind of grouping together and taking on these challenges all at once. Instead, each policy that has dripped out one by one has created divisions between every different group, every different demographic in the country as they've all come individually as opposed to all at once. And even seen, you know, cabinet ministers trying to make their case and trying to write in and say to the Prime Minister, aside from Rachel Reeves, you know, please don't let her take our money. It's fascinating, but they've got a chance with the budget. There is still a chance to turn it around, to change the conversation, to make it positive and show people what Labour values are supposed to look like in government.
How would you suggest that they turn it around? What do you think they can do to make it more positive for people?
Well, there needs to be some consistency on where these, you know, cuts, if they are cuts, to fall, because the Labour Party is meant to represent things and Labour values. The Conservative Party is the same. There's sides. There's certain things you would expect a Labour government to do, which, you know, many people in Conservative media will disagree with. There are things you would expect the Conservative Party to do that many people on the left and people like myself would disagree with. But to see the party try and walk both roads and have it both ways, and to try and talk about cutting red tape on businesses, having a free market, having all these kind of wonderful, amazing free hikes for businesses, whilst at the same time talking about potentially making cuts to welfare, that immediately loses your entire base. It loses your entire arc of support. And newly elected Labour backbenchers in private are already saying, this isn't what I wanted to represent in government, and it's not what I was hoping for. So they can't walk both roads. They can't have it both ways.
That's a very interesting point. James Matthewson, thank you very much for joining us. James, a former Labour spokesman. OK, now, let's see what my panel make of this one. James, I'm going to come to you first on this. Lots of our viewers, and in general, people are going, I'm not entirely sure Labour's manifesto was entirely honest, or at least it didn't come with the small print we felt like we needed to explain what they were going to do. What do you make of that?
Well, Labour's manifesto was a profoundly flimsy document which was not meant to lay out exactly what they would do in government. It was to be minimally able to be attacked so they could stand there next to the bin fire, which was the Tory government, and win by default. So it's no surprise that it hasn't laid out an actual programme for government. And that's why when you look at the budget, it's a mess, it's incoherent. You hear reports that Reeves is telling ministers they have to cut capital investments this year, while also briefing that they are looking at expanding big investment into capital projects. That seems totally incoherent. And there's a reason for it. It's not just the incompetence, it's that the Labour Party is currently controlled by two forces. One is Treasury orthodoxy, and the Treasury orthodoxy is always to reduce things, the benefits, the things that we all share and have for the majority of people, and corporate capture through the takeover of corporate lobbyists in key positions within the Labour Party, which is why the sorts of policies that you could bring forward, like increasing taxes on multinationals by forcing them to declare all of their earnings in one jurisdiction so they can't move it from one to the other, increasing taxes on the wealth of multi-millionaires, these sorts of things which the overwhelming majority of people in the country support are common sense, and you could do that and therefore not have to take away things from ordinary people, not have to take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners, and actually you could put money into things that we all need. So the reason why it is this incoherent mess is because, yes, people might have voted thinking that they were voting for Labour values, but that is not what Rachel Reeves and the team around her possess.
Interesting. What do you make of it, Claire?
But they had 14 years in opposition from a dire, weak government that had leaders coming in and out of Number 10 quicker than Graham Brady was getting the letters through the 1922 committee, notwithstanding the fact of the Horizon IT issues with the Royal Mail. Perhaps the letters didn't go in as quickly as they ought to, or they might have. But in terms of this budget that's coming up, and the timing of it could not be any better, I don't think, for them, because it is going to be so scary for many, many people around about the time of Halloween. But then my first point was they had 14 years to get some coherent, good, structured, disciplined guidelines in their manifesto to get going, but they didn't. So it makes you actually wonder what people voted for when they voted for Starmer. For me, it wasn't a vote for Labour Party, it wasn't a vote for Keir Starmer, it was a vote purely and simply to get rid of the Conservatives. And it worked. But look what's happened.
It's buyer's regret we're almost getting at the moment. As Claire's just said, a lot of people just voted to get rid of the Conservative Party, hoping that Labour would be the change that we were promised.
Yes, and
we need a change.
Yes, of course,
yes,
we need big change in the country. I spent years banging my head against supposedly clever pundits who meant to know about politics, and they're saying, "Oh no, don't worry, Keir Starmer will do nice things when he gets in. He's just saying he's not going to do anything." Saying no, if you don't come in with a plan, which involves, yes, you have to work out the plan, but also we know that in order to deliver for ordinary people, we're going to have to take on some people who have quite a lot of wealth and quite a lot of power. And that requires strength and solidity, and to win the argument. You can't do it by stealth. You can't turn up the next day and say, oh, actually, we are going to tax multinationals without having done a plan for it. You need to build up both the plan and the support for the plan, and they didn't do any of that.
Do you know what this has actually shown? And I'm not a favourite of spin doctors at all, but the comms at Number 10 at the moment are horrific. Absolutely horrific. The hypocrisy that's been allowed to go on. I mean, Taylor Swift, for heaven's sake, that is a non-story. It's a non-starter. The mainstream media should not have been concentrating on that at all. It was just ridiculous.
I would more, to be honest, I would more say it's no, I'd more say it's not my taste, but I'd more say it's the decisions that they've taken rather than how they've spun it. Not wishing to, I mean, as a former spin doctor in the union in support of spin doctors, but. They've made these decisions. They have, the big things that have happened since they've come in Okay, one was there were racist riots across the country.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not something that they could have planned or dealt with. They had the ongoing freebie scandal, which really stands in for, I think, the reason why it's such a big story is it's not just the hypocrisy, it's also to do with the corporate capture and the corporate takeover that has happened.
And the allowing of Lord Ali to get a pass for number 10.
Of the Labour, but it's all part of that's all part of the same thing. And then their big decision so far has been to cut winter fuel payments and to do it ages, to signal you're going to do it way before it actually happens, uniting almost everybody in the country who looks at this and go, hold on, we voted for change, and now you say there's going to be a run on the pound if we don't take away a few pounds for from cold pensioners this winter. No one looks at it and goes, oh yes, I'm convinced.
Yeah, OK, right, we have to move on, but you are staying with me. Thank you very much. I'm Dawn Newsom, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. Was One Direction star Liam Payne badly let down by the music industry? I'll be joined by author and music historian Leslie Ann Jones, who has some very explosive views on this one. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare. To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be, there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Newsom. Now, the tragic death of Liam Payne at just 31 years old echoes the untimely deaths of iconic stars like Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse and Karen Carpenter. I'm asking if the weight of fame drives celebrities towards self-destruction, and I'm thrilled to say that I am joined by author and music historian Leslie Ann Jones, who has written a very, very powerful article on the tragic and self-destructive patterns of the lives of some people in the rock and roll world. Leslie Ann Jones, thank you very much for joining us. Absolutely thrilled to have you on the show today. I read your piece in the Express newspaper. Incredibly powerful, incredibly strong words. Sex and drugs and rock and roll, why is it so destructive? I mean, what makes kids like Liam, who auditioned for the X Factor when he was 14, end up in this tragic story?
Well, you've just given us the answer there, haven't you? He was 14 the very first time he appeared on the X Factor. And without wishing to sound unsympathetic to his mum and dad, who are grieving terribly, we know they have all our sympathy. What was he doing on the X Factor at 14? And he was quite clearly groomed between 14 and 16 because they brought him back. This is a kid who had minimal education, who has stars in his eyes, who's being encouraged to go for it and to try and achieve stardom via the X Factor, because they make it look so glamorous, they make it look easy, and they make it look as though everybody's in with a chance. So for me, I'm sorry to say the fault lies with the parents and with programs like the X Factor.
Wow, strong words, Leslie. So what difference do you think that... I mean, the industry has thrown up these tragedies before Simon Cowell and the X Factor existed. I mean, you describe in this piece that many musicians are feeble and strange. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, artists, and I'm talking about real artists, not just kids who see a show and think, well, I could have a go, I could be that, you know, why shouldn't I if they're doing it? I'm talking about genuine artists, people who start to write angst-ridden poetry when they're about 8 or 9 years old, people who pick up a guitar at a very young age or start to play the piano really young, like Christine McVie in Fleetwood Mac, and they are channeling all their angst and all their emotions and feelings through music. So they are finding relief. And then, of course, the byproduct is that other people cotton onto their music and their songs become universally useful. And that's a different category from the kind of kids we see get on these shows who are just chances, really, aren't they? They're just having a go. So somebody like Liam Payne, no musical training, no musical background, as far as I know, no instrumental technique or need to prove himself as a musician. It's really just the aim is fame and fortune. And that's where it's gone wrong. Yes, we've always had artists that have fallen off the side, usually because they've made too much money, they've got too heavily into drugs and booze. So, you know, history's littered with them. Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, you know, John Bonham, Keith Moon, we've had a whole string of them throughout history. So, because you use the cliche yourself, sex, drugs, rock and roll, it becomes almost a glamorous thing. And we've got to stop glamorizing this now. We need to harness this tragic death of Liam Payne, and we need to hold him up as an example and say, look, do you really want this possibly to happen to your child? And if you don't, then I suggest you rein them in a bit. And, you know, if they really are hell-bent on trying the music industry as a career, then send them to a college, get them musical training, get them songwriting, and bring them back when they're 18.
I mean, obviously, you know, Liam's family are grieving. We don't want to be too hard on them. And Liam was very talented. He was a very, very good singer. But do you think that Simon Cowell and the X Factor really, it should be the end of this now? The X Factor, these shows, they have no place anymore.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I mean, The Voice is a slightly different show because the emphasis is on the songs and on the singer. So we don't even, the judges don't see the singer to begin with. All they're hearing is the voice. So they're seeking potential in a voice. That's a slightly different format. But this kind of show where anybody is in with a chance, even if they can't really sing. Take somebody like Stacey Solomon, wasn't a particularly good singer, had tons of personality, and she's made a fantastic career and a lot of money being a television presenter, for example. There are success stories, but the vast majority of them do fall by the wayside. And we've heard a lot, haven't we, the last few days from people like Rebecca Ferguson, Katie Waisel, who were sort of rejects from the X Factor, if you like, who did have good voices and who did have potential, but they weren't looked after. And these people are mentally fragile anyway. They're not being helped. They're not being cared for. They do need to have psychologists involved. Maybe they do at this stage. I don't know, but it's too late for so many of them. We've always seen this. You and I are old enough to remember Lena Zavaroni, for example, who I think was on the Opportunity Knocks, was she, way back in the day, but, you know, ended up starving herself to death. So did Karen Carpenter. They aren't cared for because they are money spinners. And that's really all they are, is a cog in the wheel of the music industry.
Do you
and
think...
the aim is to make a fortune.
So do you think Simon Cowell's got a lot to answer for here, Leslie?
Yes, I do. Yeah, because he's become very, very rich on the backs of the likes of One Direction, who didn't start out as a band, and this is crucial. You know, they didn't come to the show, look, we're a band, we've been working together for years, this is what we can do. They were manufactured by the show, a bunch of disparate singers who were brought together to create something that the X Factor and Psycho, Simon Cowell's company, could make a lot of money out of. And they succeeded at that. But at what price?
Leslie Ann, you have it just very quickly, running out of time. Unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours. You've interviewed all the big names. You've written many, many brilliant selling books. How would you sum up rock stars? Do you envy them or do you pity them?
The successful ones, so you're going to take a Madonna or a Mick Jagger, you have to admire them. When they're on stage, they're superhuman. You know, they walk on water, they really do. And I have every admiration for what artists like them have achieved. But for every Mick Jagger, there is a Brian Jones, who, after all, founded the Rolling Stones and ended up drowned in a swimming pool because he was damaged, he was misunderstood, and he wasn't getting any help. We do have help available nowadays. We are aware that people need psychological support. And these children, and Liam Payne was a child when he started out, we have to get them that support.
Leslie Ann, just quickly, you've got a book out at the moment. Just want to tell us what it is?
Oh, a new book coming next month, actually. It's called Songbird, and it's the life of Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac.
Brilliant. That's Leslie Ann Jones, iconic rock author there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie Ann. Some very, very strong words there indeed. Coming to you first, Claire, on this one. Would you like to react to what you've just heard Leslie Ann say?
I think Leslie Ann's been quite harsh, actually, on the whole entertainment industry. There are many people who are hugely talented that love their craft and love to work to do the craft. You only need to go and see a concert now, and you can see the bands that you've paid your money to go and see, and they love it. They really do. It's the high, it's the, you know, the energy, the reciprocation of, you know, of the loyalty of the fan. And indeed, they're in earnest. They are actually putting themselves out as a thank you sometimes as well to their fans. I think the thing with the X Factor and most reality shows now, I think they should be stopped in terms of talent. Not because of what's happened to Liam Payne, but because people are just tired of it now. They really are. Saturday night TV, people's viewing habits have completely changed. I mean, for instance, I downloaded and watched the whole of Rivals last night. Brilliant Jilly Cooper adaptation on Disney+. Highly recommend it. But on the more serious note, obviously what happened to Liam is an absolute tragedy, and no one would like that for their son, their brother, their father, their cousin, their nephew, whatever. No one wants that. But I don't think it was fame that took Liam's life away.
James, quickly, what do you make of it?
I think Claire makes a good point about how we consume TV differently anyway. And there was a sort of sadistic era, I think, of TV, kind of 15, 20 years ago, where basically you watch people be nasty to people. Anne Robinson on The Weakest Link, their programmes like Benefit Street, Simon Cowell, and that was a kind of unpleasant thing that happened in all of in the culture. Jeremy Kyle, all of these things, and we want less of that, I think, and I think fortunately we are getting less of it, which is good.
And I think the tone of society will change as well.
And actually has been over. Like there was some sort of demand for that kind of TV then, and you don't really see it being made.
Now people just use X.
Yeah.
Well, yes, indeed. And let me know, what do you think?
On X.
You can do it on X as well, but I mean, gbnews.com/your say is a good way to join this conversation. What did you make of what Leslie Ann had to say? Very strong words there. I'm Dawn Leeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. This is a strange one. So Keir Starmer has agreed a Rwanda-style deal to send migrants 5,000 miles to St Helena, which has received £6 million to look after them. Interesting. OK, but let's first get the news headlines with Will Hollis for you.
Thank you, Dawn. At 2:30, your top stories. The Prime Minister has insisted the government will stick to its manifesto pledges amidst reports the Chancellor may extend a freeze on tax thresholds. The Financial Times writes Rachel Reeves could raise £7 billion if the freeze is extended until 2028. It may plug some of the £40 billion gap in the Treasury's finances with a hope of avoiding a return to austerity. But critics say it will break the promise not to raise taxes. Going down under now, the King and Queen have spent their first night in Australia ahead of their royal tour in Sydney and Canberra. The couple's 6-day tour of the country started yesterday with a greeting on the runway by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The visit includes a trip to the Australian War Memorial and Sydney Opera House, plus Parliament. To China now, the Foreign Secretary says British businesses are seeking stability and clarity. David Lammy is on a 2-day visit to the country. The Foreign Minister's Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, said that bilateral ties are at a new starting point and competition among major powers should not be the backdrop to the era. But David Lammy said by being there, the UK can also raise issues it does not agree with, like Hong Kong and Taiwan.
There are areas where we can cooperate and collaborate with the Chinese, and I've been speaking to British businesses about how we do that. There are, of course, areas in which we will compete, and there are differences in areas in which we will challenge areas like Hong Kong, areas like Taiwan, areas like human rights in Xinjiang. We were able to have those conversations and raise difficult and challenging issues.
Now let's get you an update on Liam Payne's death. The father of the pop star has arrived in Buenos Aires to begin repatriating his son's body. Jeff Payne was pictured visiting the Casa Sur Hotel, where the former One Direction singer fell to his death from a third-storey balcony just days ago. Officials confirmed a search of the hotel found narcotics and alcohol, also destroyed objects in the room. His family have said they are heartbroken. Meanwhile, fans have been paying tribute in the star's hometown of Wolverhampton. And finally for you, could this be the comfiest train seat in the country? Well, that's what the company making the chairs for the HS2 rail service is hoping. Passengers will be treated to a whopping 87 centimetres of legroom, 2 plug sockets and, you better believe it, reclining features after backlash against some existing services where passengers compared seats to ironing boards. Rail leaders say they hope to rectify the industry's pretty bad job designing the seats. Well, good luck getting a seat when those services do start, but Tatiana will be back at 3 o'clock with your next bulletin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Will. Now, loads of people have been getting in touch with what you've just heard, Leslie Ann Jones, author, talking about with the tragic death of Liam Payne, saying that you felt she was being a bit hard on Liam and his, obviously, you know, his poor parents, which is fair. This is what this show is about. It is about strong opinions, and people are saying that not just the X Factor, remembering Lena Zavaroni from Opportunity Knocks many years ago, and we obviously have children on stage productions as well. So it's not just the X Factor and those reality shows, and obviously Lena Zavaroni met a tragic end as well. But let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Please do keep with those opinions opinions coming in. It's really important. It's all about what you have to say and what you think. And there's plenty more coming up on today's show. But before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana Akua has joined me in the studio to say what's coming up on her show at 3 o'clock. Nana, good to see you. What have you got lined up for us?
Well, we're actually going to carry on with that conversation, whether it's time to sort of end these fame factories. And I did hear what your guest said, and I, to be honest, a lot of it I partially agreed with, but I don't believe that they should be ended because of the tragic death of some stars or people who've not been able to manage those. But we'll be discussing that in detail. Lizzie Cundy will be joining me. She knew Liam Payne very well, and of course she's very close friends with Simon Cowell, so we'll get her thoughts on that. I know it's been a very upsetting week for her. Plus, with the death of Yahya Sinwar and, of course, a drone attack on Benjamin Netanyahu, I'll be speaking live to Uri Geller at around about 5 o'clock. Now, he's very good friends with Bibi, he calls him Benjamin, and he said, thankfully, Bibi and Sarah weren't in. He also predicted that he knew the location of Yahya Sinwar on our show about a month previously, so we'll play you that clip. But there's loads to come. Kelvin McKenzie will also be joining us, giving us his life story. I'd love to hear more about him and his take on the current news agenda at the moment. But that's all on the way.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Nana. Also wearing orange, but she doesn't look like a pumpkin if the husband's watching, by the way. And so remember, let us know your thoughts on everything we are talking about today. gbnews.com/yoursay. We've got loads of stuff coming up. It's Pat Show, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Quick break, don't go too far. We'll see you very soon.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So today should be a dry day for most of us. There will be some sunny spells around, but Storm Ashley arriving from the west overnight tonight brings some wet and windy weather. Situated out in the Atlantic at the moment, we do have this ridge of high pressure ahead of Storm Ashley. A weather front out towards the southeast will bring some remnants of some cloud and rain for the southeastern parts of England this afternoon, perhaps turning heavy at times here. But for much of the rest of the UK, there will be plenty of sunny spells around. Maybe 1 or 2 isolated showers, particularly southwest England, Wales, western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland too, but they should be few and far between. Temperatures today a little above average for the time of year, 16 or 17 degrees in the south and 13 or 14 degrees further north, so feeling quite pleasant in any of that sunshine. The rain in the far southeast eventually clears its way eastwards as we head in towards this evening, leaving a dry start to the night for most of us. There will still be 1 or 2 showers around, particularly across western parts of the UK, particularly northwestern parts of Scotland seeing 1 or 2 showers, but quite a mild end to the day with those temperatures well into the double figures. As we then go through the rest of the night, we see what those showers continuing across western parts of Scotland, but clouds starting to build from the southwest as we see this initial band of rain associated with Storm Ashley pushing its way eastwards into the early hours of the morning. As this initial band of rain arrives, we do see those winds starting to pick up, particularly through Irish sea coasts. We could see gusts here of around 50 to 60 miles per hour. Generally quite a mild night though, under all that cloud and particularly those strong winds in the west. We could see the odd touch of frost across the very far east of Scotland, but generally a mild start to the day on Sunday. That band of rain pushes its way eastwards quite quickly due to those brisk westerly winds, but the winds really picking up across the northwest as we head through Sunday afternoon. We could see gusts here of 70 to 80 miles per hour, so there could be some disruption associated with those winds. Another mild day, temperatures still above average, but feeling cooler than Saturday.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
there you are. Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. I hope you've got a nice cuppa, because lots of you have been sending your thoughts in, and please do, gbnews.com/your say. Lots of you have been getting in touch about what Leslie Ann Jones had to say about the Liam Payne situation. This is from Jill. Hi, Jill. She says, with the Liam Payne situation, fame does play a part, as having the finances to get the drugs is easier with money, but there should definitely be some counselling for these people to talk through how much their lives will change. And literally overnight, these shows prepare them for the future. Indeed, there is a duty of care in all these shows. As we said earlier on, going back from, sort of opportunity knocked back in the day to the X Factor now. Meanwhile, Lorraine says, Dawn, I agree with Claire. I believe Liam Payne probably was struggling maybe before he went into the music industry, and this was his escape. Music was something he absolutely loved to do. And he was, actually, one thing I do disagree with Leslie on was he's very talented. He was a great singer when he was at 14 on that show. But you do have to ask how well we are looking after people going into this business. OK, at gbnews.com/your say, join the conversation, or at GB News on our socials. Now, this is a weird story. So Keir Starmer has agreed a Rwanda-style deal to send migrants who arrive on the Chagos Islands to St Helena, another British sovereign territory in the Atlantic Ocean. It sparked a backlash from MPs, with many still angry about the Prime Minister's decision to sign away the islands back to Mauritius, and also scrap the Rwanda deal, which involved processing migrants on an offshore location. Claire, what do you make of this one?
I am absolutely
You're almost
dumbfounded.
speechless, which doesn't happen with Claire,
For the first time ever. I mean, the Chagos Islands, we gave them back to Mauritius, but they're renting parts of the airway because we've still got air bases there. And now we're going to send immigrants from this country over to the port of St Helena. It's completely baffling. £6 million more, as if the Rwanda scheme didn't waste money anyway. In fact, to be honest with you, Rwanda seems a perfectly nice place to go. I feel like moving there myself now, because this country's turning into such a wonderful place to live, isn't it? Not.
Well, that's a fair point, actually. I mean, basically, asylum seekers arriving in the Chagos Islands...
Oh, in the Chagos Islands,
yeah,
right.
...will be deported to St Helena, which is another UK territory.
But why don't we just let Mauritius look after them? If the territory's back in their hands now?
It's not. The territory's not yet back in their hands. It should be in, I think it's 18 months or something. They're still going through the process. So what's happening is, I think it's like a few hundred people have arrived on boats from Sri Lanka to claim asylum in the Chagos Islands.
Yeah.
I mean, it does seem ridiculous.
Is there any industry in the Chagos Islands for people to move to? What will they do when they get there?
So the Chagos Islands is one giant US military base, which is why the Chagosians were, in a crime against humanity, removed from their homeland and displaced en masse, the entire people, in order for a US military base to be built. As part of the deal that hands the country back to, or the territory back to Mauritius, the US base has a 100-year lease with an option to renew for 40 years. So it secures the US base there. I mean, really, the US base should be dismantled and the people should be paid compensation. I mean, imagine you have a small community of a few thousand people and they just decide, no, you can't live here anymore, and ship you off to the other side of the world.
We're going slightly off topic here. Let's stay on the topic of the fact that, the hypocrisy of Keir Starmer cancelling the Rwanda deal because it was inhumane, his words, but this isn't inhumane, Claire.
No, I know, I get it. I mean, I was reading it on the tube on the way here, and it just smacks of Starmerism. It's almost like a two-tier asylum seeking now, isn't it?
Yeah, what do you, James?
We don't disagree. I mean, they shouldn't be doing this if people have arrived there and it's still a British territory seeking to claim asylum. Then those cases should be processed where they are. And if they are genuine asylum seekers from Sri Lanka, which has had a huge amount of turmoil in recent years,
people from Sri Lanka,
it's a few hundred people, which shouldn't take that long to process. You don't need to pick people up, ship them St Helena is almost as far away as you could possibly get. The Chagos Islands is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, like far south from Sri Lanka, between East Asia and Africa, and St Helena is in the middle of the Atlantic, like equidistant between Brazil and Africa. It's a huge distance away. St Helena is a small British British colony. 4,500 people live there. It's a very strange deal. I'm sure it's got something to do with the US military base and not wanting to have people there before they hand back sovereignty. That will probably be it. But yeah, no, it's a ridiculous thing.
And it's cost £6 million of your money. In any case, I'm Dawn Newsom, this is GBNews, and we are actually talking about everything you want to talk about, gbnews.com/your site. Remember to get involved. OK, now let's take a quick break. Time to put the kettle on, but we'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Italian wine in Britain is worth a whopping £891 million and can be described as a Prosecco phenomenon, apparently. So joining us now to tell us more about why these Italian bubbles are so popular is Ed Smith, the founder of The Emissary, a British-based Prosecco brand. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, guys.
Thank you for coming in, and you've done just as we asked. You come laden with booze and bottles and glasses.
Exactly.
So the definition of Prosecco, Tatiana, you were saying earlier, is sparkling wine that's been made in certain areas of Italy. Which areas?
Exactly. So the Prosecco region is northeast Italy. It's about sort of an hour north of Venice. Foothills of Dolomite Mountains. Very, very beautiful part of Italy. Veneto, exactly. Well done.
Show off.
I'm half Italian, so...
well, there we go. OK, you should be teaching me.
No, that's it.
So, yeah, so like Champagne, that has to come from the Champagne region in France. Prosecco has to come from the Prosecco region in Italy. And it's different to Champagne and other sparkling wines, like English sparkling wine, in that geography, like we just mentioned, has to come from that region in Italy. The grapes that are used are different. So Prosecco has to be at least 85% Glera, which is the native grapes of the region. And it's most importantly the method. So Champagne and English sparkling wines use the traditional method, where second fermentation, which produces the bubbles, happens in the bottle. Whereas Prosecco uses what's called the Charmat method. So the second fermentation happens in steel vats. It's a much quicker process, and that's why Prosecco is a bit more affordable.
So the Emissary is a British-based Prosecco brand.
Yeah.
So is it made in the UK?
No, made in Italy.
Yeah, that's why you can call it Prosecco.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't call it Prosecco unless it's made in those two regions.
Great. So can we get stuck into some of these? That's the most important thing of this morning.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. This is The Weekend with me, Dawn Newsom. Loads of you have been getting in touch. My favourite part of the show. Now, lots of you talking about the Liam Payne story as well. And this is from Julie. Good afternoon, Julie. Saying it's too easy to blame Simon Cowell or others, but Liam was 31 years old. When does the hand-holding stop? What happened to a person become that person's fault. And Mary says the same thing. How can there be a duty of care after all these years? He had choices like many of the stars. Well, OK, keep those messages coming in at gbnews.com/your say. Now, we are moving on. Now, this is a story that is a bit of a weird one. It is about a lady called Nadine Hanson who won an unfair dismissal case against her boss, Andrew Gilchrist, at a tribunal in Leeds. She claimed he undermined her by refusing to greet her, belittling her in front of colleagues and withholding sick pay, which led to her resignation. The tribunal found that Gilchrist's actions likely eroded trust and confidence, while the compensation is yet to be decided. He remains unrepentant and says she doesn't deserve a penny. Basically, we are saying, Claire, that there is more to this. It's always more complicated, isn't it?
There's always two sides.
But the headline on this story is basically compensation because your boss didn't say hello to you.
Well, that's the headline. I don't think that's indeed what the actual story is. So from what I can glean, this lady had a hospital appointment on the day, one of the days she came into the office, because she wanted to work 4 days at home and 1 day in the office, I think. But the new boss had come into this recruitment consultancy. I think they've got 30-odd nationwide, and he wants everyone back in the office. And I say, quite right. If you're managing and you're running this office and you want your staff to come in, they should come in. There's no need for working from home now. I'm so totally against it in any event. Park that. She then believes that she came in and on the one day they were having a meeting. She said 3 times to her boss, good morning, good morning, good morning. Apparently he bluffed her. And then she subsequently found out 2 of her colleagues got pay rises and she didn't know about it. The boss says that they were given pay rises because, 1, he can see them in the office. 2, he perceived them to be doing more work. That's an argument in itself. Does he perceive they are doing more work because they can actually see them, or were they not? So she then has taken this case to an independent tribunal, working tribunal, and the tribunal has found in her favour, and she will be allocated some money in compensation.
But James, the interesting part of the story is the fact that he seemingly ignored her and didn't say hello is also part of this. Now, you know, if you'd have walked in here today and I just completely ignored you, would you have been upset by that?
Well, Dawn,
enough to complain to the boss?
But in this case, you would be my boss. You're not my boss, and you haven't, I don't know, withheld sick pay, if that was something I gleaned from that. These stories are extremely hard. The reason why we have independent employment tribunals and these things go through that rather than through the press is because this is going to be a complicated thing between 2 people who clearly didn't get on, who wanted different things out of their work, and that came to a head in some way. And now it's being resolved. She might get 0 compensation. She might get £1,000. It might be small. It might be a lot. She could be totally in the wrong, and the tribunal is wrong. She could be totally in the right, and the tribunal is right. We can't know from one news story.
I'm going to be terribly rude and say shut up because we have run out of time. I'm sorry. I'm not that rude, honestly. Well, I've been Dawn Neeson. This has been GB News. Thank you so much for joining me and watching me, and thank you very much for James and Claire for joining me this last hour. Don't go anywhere though, because there's loads more coming up on GB News today. It's Fiery Debate with Nana Aquia, and at 6 o'clock it's the Saturday 5. If you've missed anything on today's show, go to our website and have a look. You can catch up there and find out what's coming up on the shows over the weekend as well. So all it is, have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining me. Hope you're doing something lovely with the rest of your weekend and enjoy it, but don't go too far. As I said, Nana is up very, very soon. But before I go, it's time to get the weather for you. Here you go. Have a good one.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Ashley arriving overnight tonight, bringing some very wet and windy weather, particularly across western parts of the UK. It's currently out in the Atlantic, moving its way towards us. We do have a very brief ridge of high pressure developing through this evening, bringing us some more settled conditions. And a frontal band out in the very far southeast will bring some rain for a time across southeastern parts of England. But otherwise, a mostly dry start to the night, maybe 1 or 2 showers across western parts of the UK, but generally starting dry. dry. However, cloud increasing as we see that area of rain associated with the storm Ashley arriving through the early hours of Sunday morning. It will be quite a mild night, particularly under all that cloud and rain, temperatures holding up in the double figures in some spots. But it's those winds that will really start to pick up as we go through the early hours of Sunday morning. Quite widely 50 to 60 miles an hour across those Irish Sea coastal regions, and some heavy rain associated with that too, particularly over the high ground of Scotland, northern parts of England. As that area of rain pushes its way eastwards, there will be some sunny spells across parts of Northern Ireland as we start on Sunday morning, but generally for much of England and Wales, it will be a cloudy and damp start to the day. As those winds pick up through Sunday morning, that area of rain will push its way eastwards quite quickly. It's still turning heavy at times, but there'll be some sunny spells developing behind that frontal band of rain. Across the northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will see those winds really starting to pick up, and for western parts of Scotland we could see gusts up to 70 or 80 miles an hour, and in association with some high spring tides that could lead to some coastal impacts. Temperatures still a little above average for the time of year, but definitely feeling cooler than Saturday with those strong winds. The next area of rain then arrives as we go through Sunday evening, particularly for Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, seeing the heavy outbreaks of rain through Sunday night and into the start of Monday. It will then remain unsettled as we go through the first part of next week, but temperatures still a little above average for the time of year.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year.